Welcome everybody to the Committee of Council for Wednesday, October the 2nd. We do have quorum. We have 7 councillors here. I do believe the mayor is in Germany right now, along with Councillor Fortini. And Councillor Willens is on vacation. And Councillor Bowman, I believe, Councillor Medeiros should be here soon, hopefully. So we're going to move to the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have anything to add or delete from the agenda? Councillor Palacio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to add 2 delegations, Carmen Spada and Joe Arsenio, to the community grant program update.
So, Mr. Chair, those would be listed as proposed delegations 6.2 A and B in regards to item 7.2.1, the community grant program.
Thank you, Peter. Mr. Chair, I'd also like to add a discussion on the recent changes to council meetings that were coming up. Other committee minutes that need to be ratified prior to certain dates, and the potential for calling a special council meeting.
So, Mr. Chair, that would be proposed item 8.3.6 under the corporate services section.
Thank you, Peter. Mr. Chair, I'd also like to add a discussion item on the federal election signs.
So, Mr. Chair, that would be proposed item 8.3.7 under corporate services section.
Sorry, Peter, is somebody going to need to move the removal of 10.3.2?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can speak to that with a few other meeting process changes and advice after you deal with the members and their requests on the board.
All right. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair, I would like to add an announcement from Kevin and a number of guests from the Journey for the Ride for Refuge. I guess that would be announcement 4.1.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was actually going to request 10.3.2 to be removed from the agenda.
Okay.
And finally, Mr. Chair, I wish to point out, so Councillor Williams has requested to remove the item that I was going to bring up. Given the absences of some of the members and planned absences, I know a few members have to leave for a regional matter at about 10:45 today to return back before noon. We will be at almost bare quorum, so I just wanted members to be mindful of that, that once we're at 6, members cannot leave unless we are going to take a recess, otherwise quorum is broken. And I just wish to point out, we have 2 closed session items on today's agenda, 13.1 and 13.2. There's been a request by staff, if possible, after the delegations are considered by committee, if committee wishes to go into closed session to deal with those items, in particular 13.2, as the principal subject matter expert on that item, the acting city solicitor is required to be at a coroner's inquiry this afternoon. So if there's any questions that could be addressed this morning, then that would be helpful.
Okay, so after the delegations, we'll move to 10.3.1 and 10.3.2. Sorry, which one did you?
13.
13.
Yeah, would be a closed session item.
Sorry about that.
So the suggestion would be, subject to approval of all these changes, that after the public delegations are completed,
right.
Committee move into closed session to deal with those 2 items if possible.
Okay, I think everybody's okay with that. Sounds good. So, Councillor Palacio, would you like to move approval of the agenda?
Yes, I would.
Okay, all in favor? That carries. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, in an abundance of caution, I'm going to declare a conflict on items 7.2.1, 7.2.2, 7.2.3, and 7.2.4, reports on community grant framework, as they do all include Carabram and Ribbon Roll, which my son does graphic work for.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bowman. Number 3, we're moving on to consent. Would anybody like to add or remove anything from the consent agenda? Nope. Yeah, can we have somebody move that? So Councillor Williams moves approval of the consent agenda. All in favor? That carries. Announcements. Yep, we do have an added announcement, which was 4.1 from Councillor Bowman.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and councillors. Appreciate this opportunity to come before you.
Thank you. Just a reminder, you do have 5 minutes.
Yeah, Steve
2
Allen.
minutes, sorry.
Steve Allen.
I thought it was 5, said it was 2. 2 for announcements.
Steve Allen. I'm the executive director of the Journey Neighborhood Center. It serves our Glen, Drive, and Orinda core communities. And part of what we're doing this coming Saturday morning is a fundraising ride called the Ride for Refuge. And people can participate in a 10K or 25K ride or a 5K walk to raise funds for the Journey and several other local charities. And inviting you to participate and support and be a part of this. And I was hoping to get a quick photo if I could do that.
Yeah, with council?
Yep. I think so.
Oh, Council.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I've been working with Councillor Bowman as we're in his ward, and also Councillor Medeiros. So when would appropriate time to take the photo be?
As soon as I give my comments.
Okay, thank you. Then I'm good.
Okay, you're on. Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you guys for coming here today to have the photo taken, and thank you for everything you do at the Journey. It's a remarkable organization, and anybody that doesn't know about it should look it up, and it's a fine example of how communities can come together and support one another, especially not just in a time of grave need, but ongoing as the community grows and develops. So I thank you for that. I will be there, and I've already sponsored the flat footers for the walk. I believe that's Kevin. So thank you very much, and if council would like to come up for a group photo, that would be much appreciated.
You'll have a bite, yeah.
Well, that's what I suffered.
Oh, are we going on that side?
Apparently, well, we can, yeah. Yeah, I work so hard.
Was that your phone? Your camera's going off.
Have we had anybody ride a bike in here? I think that, yeah.
That'd be a first, down the stairs.
Yeah. Ooh, oh dear. Oh my. Sure.
There you go.
Right out.
Does anyone want to? Jeff, do you want to sit on it?
Oh, no.
I can make an interesting headline.
Councillor Briggs, Lady Council.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the support.
Thank you.
We will see you Saturday morning. Yes, yes. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, before we begin, there was a couple of items that we did not add to the approval of the agenda, so I do believe we need to get 2/3 to reopen. So, can we get 2/3 to reopen the agenda? One is,
Through you, Mr. Chair, I understand your proposed items are to, one is to expand the Brampton Entrepreneurial Center
Yep.
across the city, and the second is in regard to a mission to Turkey, I believe.
that's correct. All in favor to reopen? Thank you. And so you've stated the added items. Do we need to vote on
On adding them,
to add
yes.
them to the agenda for discussion? All in favor? All in favor? Thank you.
So they'll be
Yes.
added items 7.3.3 and 7.3.4.
So the next is the government relations item, 5.1. It's a briefing note from Lowell Rubin Bond. Somebody who's
Good morning.
representing you today.
Good morning, Chair and members of Council. I'll try to hop into Lowell's shoes today and provide you with a brief update on developments last week. Tomorrow, the Waste Management Strategic Advisory Committee is meeting at 11 a.m. and wanted to point out an item 4.4, which is an update on the transition of the Blue Box program to full producer responsibility. It is a part of the provincial Made in Ontario Environmental Plan. Early in the year, the ministers appointed a special advisor, provided his recommendations to the minister, which by and large are consistent with the positions advocated by municipalities and the region. Notable dates are early 2020 is when we expect ministry to consult on the new Blue Box regulations, and the staff are monitoring that, as well as starting in 2023, province is looking to start transitioning the program to producer responsibility, with December 31st excuse me, being the date for the full producer responsibility. Region is expecting to realize approximately $10 million a year in savings once the program is fully transitioned, and regional staff will be providing an update as more information becomes available. Also last week, the province has announced public consultations on transforming and modernizing the delivery of Ontario's building code. The province is looking at the new administrative authority to provide more efficient and user-centric services, as well as improve customer service. There are a number of regional information sessions. The nearest one will be in Vaughan on October the 16th. Also, there is an online survey available for the public to provide their comments. The comments and submissions are due by November the 25th, and the staff are reviewing the discussion paper that was released as part of a consultation. Also last week, the province has confirmed that 39 municipalities will be taking advantage of the Audit and Accountability Fund to conduct independent financial reviews. Brampton is one of those municipalities. I think the key points to keep in mind is that the reviews are to be undertaken in 2019, with December 31st, 2019 being the date for final reports to be posted. The city has been offered to apply for a deadline extension to January 31st, 2020 to deliver the final report to the province. That does not affect the requirement to have the report posted by December 31st. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a question from Councillor Singh.
Yeah, I just wanted an update on, I think we're supposed to have a meeting with our MPPs about the LRT, and I think we requested about almost 3-4 weeks ago, so just want to know where we're at with that.
So through the chair, we have been speaking with both offices daily, and at this point we do have 2 dates that we're looking at, and we'll see if
Through the chair, if I may.
Yeah.
So we are in the midst of securing a date.
Okay.
Tentatively, I think now we're working on October 16th, and we will be emailing Mayor and Council of the date for anyone who can join on that meeting.
Okay, all right, thank you.
There's no other speakers. Councillor Singh moves receipt of the presentation. All in favor? Carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
We move on to delegations, and the first delegation is from Kevin Berry, Library Outreach Worker, Social Worker, Brampton resident, and Sandra Tavares regarding the Open Window Hub.
Good morning. I'm Kevin Berry. Brought with me Sandra Tavares. So I respect the time, so I'm going to try to go quickly through this presentation. Just to give a little context, so the Open Window, so I'm a social worker with the City of Mississauga. I work for the City of Mississauga Library System. So in 2017, the City of Mississauga was awarded a grant of $122,000 from Employment and Social Development Canada under the Innovative Solutions to Homeless project to create the Open Window Hub. And the premise for it was to address the needs of the Mississauga Library System, who identified a number of vulnerable, marginalized, and homeless individuals accessing the 18 branch libraries and really feeling they didn't have the capacity to support the needs of some of these vulnerable customers. So, so they hired me. Social work within libraries is growing rapidly. There's a number of cities across Canada that have social workers embedded within libraries, and the program, the idea really started in San Francisco many years ago. So I began in 2017 to lead and develop the program. The program is, I guess, run right through June of 2018. The program was extended, the pilot was extended. In January 2019, a charitable donation was received in the amount of $130,000 a year for the next 3 years from the P&L Odette Charitable Foundation, which has significantly supported the program and helped us kind of move forward with many initiatives. In April 2019, the council approved the library budget to make the Open Window Hub a permanent program going forward. So we transitioned from the pilot phase. So the Open Window Hub is based out of the Central Library, though support all the branches. And the picture just provides an example of the space. The space is used by vulnerable and marginalized customers. It's a safe place to come, access services, and just kind of relax. The scope of service. So it's really, I guess as it said, building relationships with vulnerable customers within the 18 branch libraries. And also throughout, I guess the role is really extended outside the library as really other city services intersect with vulnerable and marginalized customers, and they've kind of asked me to provide support where possible. Crisis intervention and support to library branches, I guess, is examples of people that just present and not at risk to themselves or imminent risk to sell for others, but maybe identifying as recently homeless, mental health crisis, and those type of situations, and where possible, I will attend the branch and just try to engage them. And the immediacy is important, really trying to engage people really in the moment and build those relationships. Short-term case management is reflective of just the needs of the customers and the people I see is not a quick fix. They have complex needs. The issues of homelessness are very complex, and it's not just a sort of one meeting and then kind of moving people on. So oftentimes people need just a little bit more time to really help stabilize them and really access service. Community service referrals, resource and benefit information. So we're really just trying to make people understand what services are available, resources, and making sure they're getting the benefits they're entitled to under current funding programs. Provide basic necessities, food, snack items, clothing, hygiene items. The City of Mississauga has a shower pass program, so where individuals can attend any community center and ask for a shower pass, and a card is provided to them where they can shower, so they don't have to provide any ID. Transit fare is another one, so the ability with the charitable donation helps fund transit, which is a significant barrier for many people who don't have money to get to appointments and things like that. Obtaining Ontario health cards. So Service Ontario has a long-standing program in place, so really providing agencies and programs with the ability to provide a form to individuals to obtain a health card. So to provide some context, to provide to get an Ontario health card, if you've lost, it's expired, it's been stolen, damaged, I mean, you need to provide proof of residency, you need to ID, all these different stipulations. So people that are homeless often don't have those documents available. So it was really, so part of it, really, starting the program was just really reaching out to Service Ontario and creating this program. And I kind of qualified, or use it as, to describe it as a carrot. Oftentimes people ask, what can I provide you? And a health card is something very tangible. I mean, I can't always provide people housing and other things that they really want, but at least it's a start. It's starting a conversation if I can get your health card and get you some ID. Okay, so just trying to look over, I guess I can go over there, the barriers. So part of it, the role is being very frontline and really addressing the service barriers that exist within the city, within sort of people accessing programs. This is an example of the individuals supported over the course of the program. The contacts really reflect the number of individuals that are seen over, like the repeat customers that are coming. This referral process reflects some of the other individuals, different services that I intersect with and way people are referred to the Open Window Hub. Go quickly and all over time. Tuesday Lunch Program, we began a program in June of 2000 of this year, and the program is serving lunches to individuals who access the Open Window Hub each week. And the basis of the program was to also invite other City of Mississauga employees, security, and other library staff, others, with the idea of going forward of inviting counselors and other staff from the city to really sit down and have lunch with these individuals and really understand the needs of them. So the idea, the premise is based on when you serve people, it changes, the power dynamic changes if you sit with them at a table and eat with them, as opposed to standing across the table and serving food with them. Milk bag mats, so there's a woven milk bag mats, taking milk bags and making these sort of plastic mats and distributing to individuals who are sleeping outside. And the basis of that part of it too was really just to create an awareness around homelessness within the City of Mississauga, as well as providing something tangible for people to use. And these are some of the upcoming initiatives, and I'll go quickly through them. Thanksgiving lunch, where an invitation is extended to Community Services Commissioner, City of Mississauga, city councilors, and security staff to really sit down and be the first thing to sit down with some of these individuals. I put a sock in it, was a sock drive. Again, it's really to get socks for homeless, to provide to homeless individuals, but it's also, again, to really bring awareness to the issue of homelessness. I can jump around here. The Open Window, we'll be screening, there's a movie, The Public, so it's a movie that was a Hollywood movie, didn't get a lot of release, but it's filmed in Baltimore, and it's about homeless individuals that kind of find, in a cold weather alert, kind of take over the Baltimore library because they have no shelter. So the idea is really to do it, to bring community services agencies in and have a panel of people with lived experience and really just kind of make that connection to the library and homelessness, because that's often that people don't connect the library and homelessness. And in 2020, the first annual Homeless Connect Mississauga, again, another initiative starting out of San Francisco, and it's a program that's run across North America. Toronto, Edmonton, Vancouver have them. And it's an event where different services come together for one day and provide service to the homeless. So it's haircuts, foot care, vaccinations, all kinds of things like that. And then looking to do a landlord engagement workshop and using the library community to help really engage landlords and see if we can get other services to come and address some of the stigma and the barriers people have with accessing housing. Sorry, I don't have time. Thank you. Was there any questions? I know, sorry, I apologize for trying to go very quickly through that whole presentation.
No, thank you so much for that presentation. We do have a few questions. Councilor Vicente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, Mr. Chair, to the delegates, Kevin and Sandra, thank you so much for coming here today to explain to us the great work that you're doing at the Mississauga Library System. Libraries are one of those places where people are free to come and go and enter and spend time, and as it is in so many large cities like Brampton and Mississauga, persons who are, as you say, vulnerable or have needs and have nowhere else to go tend to visit libraries and spend their time there trying to figure out how to better their lives. And here in the city of Brampton, I know Councillor Santos and I had the opportunity to tour the library system, and we learned from our tours there with Rebecca Raven, who is here today to be here with us, that our library staff tend to act as a kind of a first point of contact for so many people, especially in our downtown area, who spend time in the library and are helped there and assisted by our staff, particularly our security staff. And the work that you are doing there takes it several notches above that, and I want to commend you. We want to commend you for what you're doing there. It's true, you know, when your life is not where you want it to be, kind of tend to lose track of those things that are important. For example, something as simple as having identification or having clothing or food. And when you have the library there and you're spending your time there, and there's somebody there who's able to help you to organize and get those elements of your life back on track is so valuable. And we had the opportunity to speak with you a few weeks ago, and we were so impressed by the work that you're doing. And I know that our library system here has also been impressed by the work that you do. And so I believe that this is one of the things that, as Brampton Council, we have an opportunity where typically something like this would be addressed at the regional level. There is something that we can do at the lower tier level to make a huge difference and have a big impact on the lives of people who need it the most. And so I want to thank you again for coming here today to present to us. And I'd like to ask that staff work with the library board to look at this program and to explore ways on how we can offer this level of service here at the City of Brampton as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You want to hold on to that referral? Or do you want to move it now?
It's just a motion to refer the items to staff, yeah.
So just a reminder to council as well for delegations, we have to ask for questions of clarification. And so I'd just like to remind everybody, all the rest of the speakers as well, just to keep that in mind. And so Councilor Vicente has moved referral back to staff, and Councilor Santos, questions for clarification.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, and thank you for coming in today. When you first met with Councilor Vicente and I, it was during a time when Regeneration was coming to present. It's during a time when we are all discussing the growing homelessness issue that's happening in the city. And you came to us because Kevin, I believe, and Sandra, you're both residents of Brampton, correct? And Kevin, you're delivering a service and program at the lower tier municipal level in Mississauga, but not in Brampton, correct? And so you wanted to bring that possible best practice that seems to be working in Mississauga here to the city as we talk about some of the solutions to address the growing homelessness issue here in Brampton. So thank you for that. My question is about the gap. So the region of Peel delivers a whole bunch of services, and usually social service support, et cetera, happens at the region. Why is it that the city of Mississauga decided to implement an outreach program at the library at the municipal lower tier level?
I think in part that I think that there was a number of other programs already having success. So Edmonton being one, the first one in Canada. So I think that kind of looked at it. So I can't speak to region, but I guess the same question would be, you know, at Edmonton, I don't know the tiers of government, but I think it's really engaging people where they're at. I think, and the other part I think to really go back to libraries is that library staff make my job much easier because individuals, they build relationships or they're aware of it, right? So that's the other piece of it, I think. So library staff have that engagement, that relationship, and even if I'm not the branch, it's really easy for them to kind of pass information on. And I think it keeps information within house. It's much easier, I guess, as you move through different tiers to other services. I think there's issues of consent and other things like that, so it's easy to really move within a system. I think it's much more streamlined and much easier to engage people, more immediacy. I think as examples, if another branch calls me, I'm able to go relatively quickly. It's just a phone call where maybe at a region, maybe there's certain processes, intakes, things like that. So I think that's the other challenge. So I think that's with kind of going outside of the city.
And thank you. And so as the city is looking for ways for us to bridge the gap and make sure that we're delivering, you know, efficient and effective services to address the homeless issue, there seems to be, in this pilot program, a gap that at the city level we are able, as the Mississauga is able to help and assist, whether that's meeting those who are homeless and those who are vulnerable at the library, as you said, where they are at, and referring appropriately the services to the region, because right now there isn't that's not happening. Is that correct? Without this program, it wouldn't necessarily be happening in this proactive way.
I think it's happening, but I think there's many individuals experience barriers to accessing services. So not everyone has access to a cell phone, or transportation, computer literacy, things like that. So sometimes it's just a conduit to get people connected. So I think that's the other challenge.
And so, because a lot of those services, or those the computers, the phones, etc., the books, are available at the library, those who are wanting to get themselves off the streets and access to the service naturally come to the library for those questions. And Kevin, through the City of Mississauga and the Mississauga Library, how many staff are assigned to this one project?
It's me. I do have support, obviously, from Laura, like our manager and director, Laura Reed, and Lori Kelly. I mean, the whole system has been very supportive, and even really other tiers of it have been very supportive of my initiatives, bringing it forward. So I think they're very supportive. But on the front line, I have had student internships, but it's been me. And I think that's so that's where.
So through one person, supported now by a foundation, through the success of the pilot program in Mississauga, you are able to touch the lives of those who are homeless in Mississauga, those who are willing and wanting to find another way forward, and they're going to the various libraries, and you are essentially kind of troubleshooting to provide the referral services that those vulnerable people need to move their lives forward. And so I think, just through the questions in your presentation, that is the reason why we support this referral back to staff to look at whether or not we could deliver this with the library, because it is a bit of an innovative way to address a gap in the community between the region and the city when it comes to the homeless issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Santos. Councillor Williams?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks so much, Kevin, for coming in and talking about this. Anytime we are able to provide services to link clients to other organizations and to, means to help them get them back on their feet is absolutely necessary and so important to the city moving forward. I do have a question. Oftentimes when people are experiencing homelessness, they'll go through different organizations, and especially during the day when people are homeless, they go to the library. But they may be going to the library during the day because they can't stay at the shelters during the day, or they can't stay in other places where they're getting services during the day. So the library is like a place they go to kind of, get connected, but also kill time, really. So of those clients that are coming in, how many of them do you know are already linked to like SHIP, or linked to Nexus, or linked to the YMCA, or even some of the shelters in Mississauga?
There's a fair number. There is a fair number that have access primarily to the shelter. Some, I guess I will refer to the outreach team as well. They're connected. So again, there's always that communication between individuals, and there's some that aren't connected at all. So I will say that, and again, based on individuals make a choice not to enter the shelter system for whatever choice and choose. Right. So there's a number that aren't, and I think sometimes it's about relationships. I think that's the key part of when I try to use the contacts. Is so much of it is a relationship that I guess very much people are very quick that if you don't follow through, and again, it's not always our fault, but I think people really feel that if you didn't follow through, you said you're going to do something, then they kind of put you on the, they kind of scratch you off, right? And again, it's not reflective of the work of it, but sometimes that's what they feel like they've been let down so many times.
Right.
So that's really important. So it's very, I think that's part of it. So sometimes it's rebuilding those relationships and making those connections back to services. Because I can't do it all. I guess that's part of it, really. Yeah. And part of it, there's other services that provide like SHIP, housing referrals. So I can facilitate maybe that housing application and things like that, and then have SHIP take it from there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's really important. That relationship building is so important in order to keep them connected and get the services. So I was looking at the numbers. Around 9 individuals come through or speak with you per day. Mm-hmm. Are those 9 new individuals per day on top of the number of clients that filter through, or is that
it's a mixture? Yeah, a mixture. It's just like, sometimes just people that are, I won't use this term, but yeah, people that use the service daily. Okay. And so, yeah.
So,
And then new individuals may just kind of appear as well within that, so on average, so.
how do you do it? There's 17 locations in Mississauga. How many locations do you think you're at, hitting every day?
So the other locations are really on a referral base. Sometimes I can make a phone call, I can just chat with someone on the phone.
Right.
I can, if someone's there, and depending on what the issue is, I'll try to go right away, or I'll try to work with library staff to identify what are the patterns of when people are attending, and try to attend, and then I'll just say I'll be there Wednesday morning, and then I'll just try to connect. So that's what I try to do, and then if not, then I'll just try to provide resources to library staff to pass on to the individual, or they'll just pass on my contact information. The person will reach out to me on my own. I don't know. I think part of it's the passion. I think it's a privilege. That's what I look at it. The library has been really probably one of the best, I guess in 25 years, it's the best job I've had based on the library staff, the support I've gotten, and the opportunity to really kind of, at first, creating a project was daunting, and I didn't know where I'd go, but I didn't think, in 2 years, I didn't think that I would be here where I am. But I think that's the privilege. I think that's part of it, is really kind of taking everything that I've learned and kind of trying to, address some of the service gaps. And working on the front line, that's the other change too, is that you have a different lens when you work with people really at their level, and kind of experiencing some of the challenges they have on a daily basis really motivates me.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that definitely drove my work when I was working frontline as well. It's that intimate relationship building with the clients, and it really also heightens your awareness to the issues that are being faced in the community. So at the library, we do have the BMC, the Brampton Multicultural Center, that does work out of a number of our library systems, and it is a first point of contact for many individuals coming into our library. If we were to take you on, how would you be able to work with some of the services that are already in the library system right now?
So Indus comes in, so they have an outreach program, I guess, so similar to, so Nexus, I guess other services are already embedded. Other libraries have there's Moulton Community Neighborhood Services within the Moulton Library, it's already embedded, or the Community Center, Dixie Bloor. So again, it's just really creating partnerships and really just a referral basis. So I think that's it. Just, again, it's just about those relationships, not only with the individuals, the vulnerable individuals, but it's also service partners. And I think that's the key part of it, is that people, I guess individuals think that we create miracles, or sometimes it's just about the relationship. It's really having those relationships with, other service agencies, right? And just saying, let's take on, what do you do best, and what can we share? I'll refer someone to you, and then I'll connect back, and I think it's that. So it's really just working, because we're just trying to identify, working for the same goal, to support people. So it's really just trying to complement the work done by different agencies.
Right. Well, thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Singh.
So I just have some quick questions. Honestly, it's an amazing project. It's been great to see a lot of the work being done. I just had some points of clarification. So I think that there's a reference to vulnerable populations, but I'm hearing homelessness a lot. So are we using the words interchangeably, or do we use help communities from like migrant services, everything, or are we focusing specifically on the homeless community?
The program started initially with the focus on homelessness, and so, but it's changed. So vulnerable so there are newcomers, there are different individuals that come, and even sorry, go ahead.
Oh, seniors, newcomers, youth.
Okay, so now you're doing everybody, I guess, right?
Pretty much anyone that walks in the door that has a need.
Okay.
And it's always been anyone, really. So people identify a need, and whether it's just to connect with the service and things like that. So sometimes, so it's really been anyone, even though the basis of the program was to focus on homelessness. I wasn't turning people away because that's the other part of it. There's no criteria for service.
Okay.
So that's it. I know, and vulnerable, it could be, so there are different people that come, and everyone's supported.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh, and want to thank you guys for coming down today. And we do have a referral moved by
Councillor
Vicente. So all in favor of receipt of the presentation and for the referral? That carries. Thanks so much for coming out today, guys. Appreciate that.
I just want to thank Laura Reed, our library manager, for attending today. And a special thank you to Councillor Vicente and Santos for your support. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. So the next delegation, Peter, is?
There are two delegations in regard to the community grant program.
So those are 6.2A and B, I believe,
That's
right?
correct.
think, are you guys coming up together? Yeah, that's fine. Welcome, guys, and just a reminder, you guys do have 5 minutes.
Council, I believe I may need 7 minutes, so I'm just asking if you don't mind that quick indulgence.
No worries. Moved by Councilor Medeiros. All in favor?
Thank you.
Carries. You've got 7 minutes.
Thank you. Morning, Council, senior staff. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak today regarding Agenda Item 7.2. As you know, Be Jazz, led by myself and our Executive Director here, Joe Asensio, just presented the 3rd Annual World of Jazz Festival in downtown Brampton on September 6th and 7th. The festival presented more than 100 musicians over 2 days, supported by over 20 local corporate sponsors. This year was truly our breakout year as we welcomed a steady stream of listeners to Garden Square who enjoyed not only the music but also the unique vendors, sponsors, food and beverage merchants, and children's zone that we offered. All of us at Be Jazzed, our administration, board of directors, and robust core of volunteers were humbled and moved by the support, feedback, and most of all, gratitude expressed to us by our audience. As a non-for-profit organization founded, incorporated, established, and operating in the city of Brampton, it is opportunities such as these that make the toil of such an event worthwhile. In 2.5 short years, we've cultivated a family of followers dedicated to our cause and established wonderful relationships with the corporations that believe in our vision so much that they entrust sponsorship dollars to our work. The City of Brampton, through the Community Grant Program, is one of those corporations that entrusts us with financial support, specifically a grant of $65,000 cash. And as I have stated in this council chambers here before, the magnitude, exposure, footprint, and product that we deliver at the World of Jazz Festival annually would be impossible without that commitment. And on behalf of all of us at Be Jazzed, I want to thank you again for being one of those corporations that understands the value of our work in and for the benefit of the arts and culture brand of the City of Brampton. Our work at Be Jazzed is not limited to the festival, but is predicated by the programming that we operate through the year. In 2019 alone, Be Jazzed will have programmed nearly 200 performances in this city, and a focus and vision on presenting music and musicians in this city has simply never existed here before. Many of those opportunities are subsidized by the businesses soliciting music, such as Wendell Clark's, J. Red & Co., Brampton Golf Club, to name a few, charity and fundraising organizations, such as the Brampton Caledon Community Foundation, the Bridge Prison Ministry, as well as the Community Grant Project Stream, for which, again, we are grateful to the city. With so much exposure and so many musicians being compensated for their work, Be Jazz is now recognized as the community leader in sourcing and securing performance opportunities for our local musicians. The World of Jazz Festival exists as a championship game, if you will, for our regular season of steady performances. The festival provides an opportunity and something to look forward to for these musicians who are working hard during the year at our regularly scheduled events, and we hope to continue our very important work, again, for the benefit of the arts and culture brand of the City of Brampton. I'd like to make it very clear publicly, for those who may not understand the terms of our grant, that the $65,000 grant is 50% of eligible spending subject to a budget review. At the festival, we average an annual bill with Garden Square, anywhere between $27,000 to $30,000. So that leaves $35,000 available to spend towards the event on eligible costs, which do not include any costs incurred by the organization for its operations. This money, this $65,000, is our foundation to deliver the product that we do. A viable and well-executed product such as ours attracts people who then park, eat, sleep over, etc., which creates ROI and economic impact. You also create ROI with marketing, as people share information received through marketing campaigns, social media boosting, hashtag, etc. So essentially, the grant is the city's investment towards a project that they are incapable of delivering on their own. However, they entrust to organizations that can deliver the product, but also earn economic impact and ROI on those dollars for the benefit of the city. For example, I can tell you that Segovia Coffee beat their one-day record by 30% at the 2019 Jazz Festival. Their previous one-day record was set at the 2018 Jazz Festival. J-Red had nearly 120 reservations and saw their business increase by 25% for a normal Saturday, and Wendell Clark's had an increase to their regular Saturday business by 30%, just to name a few. We earned sponsorships from 7 downtown businesses, including Be Jazz core funder JN Realty. This information is very important to us, and even in our young existence, we see the need and priority to collect this data. The community grant program in the city currently have no metrics in place to determine ROI or economic impact of their investment into an organization. So what are we using to measure the award of $65,000? Essentially, it is an essay application and a proposed budget, and then a series of exit questions and a finalized budget. The issue with today's report is that the future of festivals such as ours that drive the arts and culture brand of Brampton, as well as demonstrate economic impact and ROI on community grant dollars, is not being protected or guaranteed for the upcoming or future years. We will have to continue to compete against other local festivals through this proposed grant review, and our viability and credibility is actually being tested against a 10% raise in minimum application scoring from 70 to 80%. This competition has never allowed for and will continue to prevent us to properly budget and prepare for a full year of festival preparation, and most importantly, disables the ability to procure venues and headline acts. Annually, we miss out on a lot of corporate sponsorship due to the short timeline we have from the grant decision to the actual event. Corporations are already budgeted or have exhausted their community outreach program by the time we meet. The best time to fundraise is immediately after the event, and for us, that is right now, since the idea is so fresh and memorable in people's minds. But without this guarantee of our future from the city, there is no way that we can move forward with planning an event that is subject to competition and council approval. Other festivals subject to this competition will also miss out on being included in the city's travel and tourism guide, which is puzzling because the purpose of the guide is to attract visitors. However, we can't include festivals in a festival city because they are subject to a competition with timelines that actually compete with the release of this guide. So for Be Jazz in the World of Jazz Festival, we are subject once again for the 4th year to prove through an application to the City of Brampton as to why our festival should be funded, why we are relevant to this city and its residents, how we instill civic pride, complete an application budget, etc., as well as wait on the city's timelines to complete their application reviews. And we have to make sure that we are applying even stronger through the increase of 10% up to the qualifying cutoff. There are at least 20 cities nationwide who are smaller than Brampton that have annual multi-year jazz festivals, including Guelph, Sudbury, Orangeville, Newmarket, Brantford, Markham, Winnipeg, Halifax, and the new city of Kensington Market. They have a festival, they're not a city. Those cities and organizations have found a way to ensure that they are relevant and returning year to year. Those cities obviously value the existence of those projects in their downtown. Here in Brampton, the reward for delivering a product with the civic pride and integrity such as the World of Jazz Festival is actually more bureaucracy and staff interference. The festival, due to its relevance to our residents, fiscal responsibility, and fundraising capabilities, previous history of responsible community grant usage, and most importantly, the economic impact to the downtown businesses and return on investment, deserves to be removed from the competition of the community grant and awarded its $65,000 grant as well, such as the precedent that has been set here today by staff by awarding Carabram, Ribbon Roll, and the Santa Claus Parade outside of the requirements of the community grant process and requirements. In conclusion, this past weekend we cut the ribbon to the entrance of the renovated Lester B. Pearson Theater at the Civic Center. And during Mayor Brown's welcoming remarks, he stated that a vibrant and progressive arts and culture scene contributes to investment and attraction to Brampton. And I agree with him wholeheartedly. This council, led by Mayor Brown, is the most progressive and youthful council we've ever had. And I'm going to steal some words from Dave Capil and say the best looking council as well. And the Rose Theatre is under the direction of a member of the Order of Canada for his legacy and artistic direction, Stephen Schipper, the highest quality arts specialist the city has ever hired. This council at this time has the opportunity to create a legacy in arts and culture because it simply does not exist in this city. You can leave a legacy by committing to properly funding and motivating a sector of the city that has never been properly funded or supported. You have allies in the community such as myself as an industry professional, patrons such as JN Realty, and Be Jazzed as a community-led non-for-profit organization that are dedicated to a long-term vision of arts support and stimulus. I hope that you will take advantage of this opportunity, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And before we get to the speaker, I just want to clarify a couple of things. He asked a few questions. Why shouldn't we be funded? There's 4 or 5 of them there. Can you just run those off for me again?
the groups that have been removed from the competition?
No, you had mentioned some, before you mentioned, staff interference, there's a few questions you were asking. Yeah, they were rhetorical questions.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So such as stuff like why the festivals aren't included in the travel and tourism guide, like that kind of stuff?
No, you said why, you had to prove why you should be funded.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm saying the purpose of the grant process is basically a festival.
Right, so just for my purposes, we'll get to it. I just want to know the questions you asked. I was writing them down.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't remember.
They were rhetorical questions, I guess, but.
Yeah, I wasn't specifically, I was just
Yeah.
throwing out all the information for council to
Yeah,
understand
okay.
what we're up against, sort of, and what we've subscribed to.
Yeah, because I have a few questions. I think
Yeah, go
and
ahead.
they're based upon those questions.
Go ahead,
you asked.
yeah.
So maybe if you can even pass that to me, I'll look.
Okay, yeah, that would be fine.
Here, can you? So we'll go to our first speaker in the meantime, Councillor Santos. Questions for clarification?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. We met over the past couple of days, and I think there are a lot of moving parts within the portfolio and the file of arts that is growing very rapidly. And so when the report comes forward later today, we will be asking questions for clarification, so everyone's on the same page. My question for you is
Sorry,
on...
I think we're going to bring the report
now?
forward.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
My question for you specifically, Carmen, is about the data collection that you're doing in partnership with the small businesses to understand what their lift is whenever the World of Jazz Festival comes to place. How are you able to capture that data as a festival yourself?
So that's something that we itemized, so this was year 3, and we really itemized that for this year. The previous years, because the festival changed its footprint, it was always a new festival. Year 1 was different from year 2. So this year was basically knocking on doors and asking, a business doesn't necessarily have to divulge receipts, but it's basically talking to the business owners and saying, we heard things went well, it looked like it went well, can you give us basically a percentage, any sort of numbers? And so that's, as I said, Segovia, J-Red, Wendell's, speaking to our sponsors, We Smoke Shop, CCV, JN. There's people like JN who are in the square that day as a sponsor who, may convert a lead, out of that event. This stuff is kind of ongoing information,
Sorry,
but from what we have...
We got to keep it the scope of the comments and the conversation to the report. And I think we're talking about the community.
So through you, Mr. Chair, these delegations are related to item 7.2.1 on today's agenda, which is the 2020 Community Grant Program Framework. So if the questions and the delegation can...
The questions to the delegation.
Can keep within that framework, that's the reason for the
Yeah,
delegation.
so just, I guess, stay within the framework of the report, I guess, is what our clerk is advising.
I asked a question specific to the delegation about how he collected data.
Fair enough. So, like I said, the advice has been given by the clerk.
So
just try to stay within the
knocking on
framework.
doors, surveys. The city, as a community grant recipient, gives us surveys to pass out to our audiences. We've added questions to those surveys because we didn't feel that the surveys reflected enough of the information that we needed to make proper decisions moving forward. So it's a combination of things: surveys, personal relationships.
Okay, great. Just a note, the downtown BIA, we had asked them to help collect data on traffic and lift in terms of sales based on the farmers market and how much. And their recommendation was for small business owners to track their foot traffic, and so how many receipts actually get printed. So not telling us the total amount, dollar amount of sales, but how many receipts are printed off, and to measure it through Lyft that way. So it's just note for future as we plan?
We did some giveaways and contests as well, which were required ballots and required email addresses. So as BJazz, we collected all of that the day of as well. Kind of similar to something like
Great.
that, create a concept that people will. So a lot of different areas, but important to collect that information so that we're creating a proper product for this.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councilor Williams.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks for coming in and giving us all the details. It's very helpful. And so I just have a question. Because of the late application process, how much money do you think you're losing out on by not being able to approach investors now?
So I always think that we run this event in basically 4 months because we launch beginning of September. We got to be done by the end of August. It's basically, April time and about there till we get going. And we still haven't closed out this year, but I know our sponsorship dollars are probably close to about 25,000. And I'd like to think if we had a full year of knocking on doors, I would like to set a goal of doubling that. To be able to, of being able to double that, to be able to say that there's maybe $40,000-$50,000 in total sponsorship that we could bring in. Especially when we look at the amount of new sponsors that we're engaging. This year, Rivera Retirement, Paradise, North American Trade Schools, Medics College, the Mailbox Express. These are all new sponsors on top of the renewing sponsors, JN, CCV, We Smoke Shop. We take very seriously that the community grant requires that you do not stop at that funding to operate your grant. We take that very seriously. And I think we're very fiscally responsible, and I'm going to give a lot of credit to Joe here. I mean, that's his role in the organization, And I just think the sky's the limit when you have that confidence that we could start knocking doors tomorrow and say, hey, did you like 2019? Here's what we're proposing 2020. And what do you need as a sponsor? And that's what we do with our sponsors, too. It's not just about come and, put money towards a program. And what do you want out of there? Do you want presence? Do you want full-page ads? Do you want half-page ads? Do you want to introduce, Proustache and Crouch every year asks to be able to support a young, emerging artist with banners on their stage to introduce and close out that act. Fine. Like, we don't have a package for that, but we're willing to a la carte or tailor that, We can go and hire somebody who can work just on procuring sponsorship, I mean, think about what those sponsors bring to the table. They're advertising, they're sharing posts, they're telling people about this event. So I think the biggest reason for protection or for guarantee is, one, to know that we have the core funding, and two, is so that we can actually start working on 2020 the day after the festival.
So you potentially could bring in 50.
I would set that as our goal.
Even more in potential sponsorships.
Yes.
If you had more time, you had the guarantee, and make it a bigger festival that would benefit the city. So just a clarification, are you required to give us the ROI for these events?
No, we answer whatever questions are in the closeout of the community grant, which is basically people have fun, where are they coming from, and then provide the final budget with receipts to be able to say this is the money we spent and how on the event. But we don't necessarily have to prove any sort of economic impact or growth in that area. It's not necessarily a requirement.
Right, okay. So just a clarification from the chair, we're going to be bringing forward the reports for discussion.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe the chair mentioned bringing forward report 7.2.1, which is the subject of the delegations.
Okay, so
there's recommendations on there.
Okay, but we're not asking questions of the staff right now. We're not asking questions of the staff right now. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, my advice would be to complete questions of the delegations and then receive the delegation, and then the report can be brought forward and committee can debate the report.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for coming in, both of you. It was a great festival.
Thank you.
We had a lot of fun, and my kids danced their butts off at Vivian Lane. It was awesome.
Good. Thank you so much.
Councilor Blushy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Carmen. Thanks, Joe, for coming. Carmen, you come every year and speak about the grant program. and I've said it from day one, this is going to be an evolving process. And I think the grant program just gets better and better every year. Is it there yet? Is it ever going to be there? Who really knows? I don't, and maybe it's not for me to judge, and we'd love to, we would love to have it come to a point where this is it and it's gonna go, but I think it always needs to be tweaked, and at least I'm okay with that. You talked a little bit about return on investments and measurables, and so I won't get into it too much, but you did touch on the timelines. And at council, we have a lot of people that come before us sometimes requesting something based on timelines of other government levels of government, i.e. the feds and the province. So from my understanding in discussions with you and listening to other of the kind of the marquee events in the city of Brampton, the Fold and Vibrant, there may be an opportunity for other levels of governments to provide support if the city of Brampton, because they don't unless the city of Brampton kind of pushes up the timelines a little bit. So I'm going to ask that we add a recommendation into the report to start the process as soon as we can, and have it ended and submitted by before Christmas, so that we can give these events opportunities to go out and fundraise, go out to your provincial levels, go out to the federals, so we can get more dollars, so that we can make these events even better if possible, because a lot of those events are already really, really good. So Peter, can I ask that to be added into the recommendations?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. I think, as I said, maybe perhaps first we finish the questions of the delegation, receive the delegation, and the matter could be debated, including amendments.
Okay.
So if you're moving the staff report when we get to that point with an amendment, that's a proper motion when we get to that point.
Okay. And then the 65,000, and I was sorry, I was busy talking to another councillor about this, but the 65,000, I guess we're at some point where we want these events to be so successful that eventually the $65,000 either come down or come off, and they're more self-sufficient, and we want to help and work with organizations to eventually get there. And you had asked the question about how do we about the dollars and giving the dollars to the organizations, and we need the justification somehow, because it's we're making decisions on it's tax dollars money. We need to ensure that the taxpayers are well aware and they're okay with these funds changing hands. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, and in regards to your comment about the deadline, moving the timelines, yeah, anything earlier is appreciated. I think the bigger conversation is more the guarantee. So we're asking to say, so instead of a March deadline, or now it's a February decision, now it would be a December decision, but that's still based on competition and decision.
Yep.
Today's report shows groups being removed from competition and being awarded based on council decision. Mm-hmm. Now we've got two tiers of, these people will stay in a competition and these are guaranteed. So how do we get to the point that the city itemizes who the preferred events are to guarantee existence, and whether it's 65 or 165, we don't know right now. So I appreciate that look into the deadline, but I think the bigger issue I have is now with the guarantees, that you can tell me December, but I'm still competing. So we as a responsible business will not knock doors and will not work on the 2020 festival until we sign our contract with the city of Brampton. We do that every year. The Guelph Jazz, or the Ottawa Jazz Festival, just lost $250,000 in funding that they thought they were getting through provincial grants that they lost. And just, we're not going to do that in such a short existence. Mm-hmm. To your point about the $65,000, $65,000 cash is an unbelievable amount of money. And I'm never going to take that away, and I'm not here asking for 66. And as I said, I can't express to you the appreciation and what that's done for the footprint of the festival with that kind of investment. However, I field a lot of the same questions that you must hear, obviously representing taxpayer dollars. I get that in the community saying, you guys are getting 65, you guys are getting 7. Well, first of all, the event is getting 65. Second of all, as I said, almost half of that has gone right back to the city. So now the event starts at 35 to program over 100 musicians and pay for everything else that's eligible in there, marketing. We spent this year, I think we're close to $15,000 in marketing to tell people to come to the city of Brampton for this event. We've spent in 2 years almost $60,000 in Garden Square, and we haven't got a single social media mention on any Garden Square platform to come to Garden Square to watch the Jazz Festival for a myriad of different reasons. So we are essentially the subcontractor to deliver this product based on your investment and other sponsor investments for the city. And, my challenge is I think the reason this is such a hot button topic to people is because there's a lot of people also who have abused or not used their investment properly. And we get compared to, well, look what this group did or didn't do. And that's why I'm saying we have to start judging and looking at the metrics that are the real metrics, not an essay and a bunch of numbers. It's to say, did you come to the event? Thank you, council, you brought your kids, they had a good time, or thank you, so-and-so business. Business, how did you do? How did you do? How many hits did we get on this? That's how we should be judging the viability of these projects, especially due to the investment. That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, and I think that there's different levels of events, and I remember dealing with a much lower level of event that was coming through the grant program. It was the Heart Lake barbecue, Heart Lake Happenings barbecue. It was a very difficult process for them to get through, and there were people that just wanted to have a barbecue, right? You guys are a little bit different by way of, yes, you're people that want to have a jazz festival, but you're bringing a lot more people. You're using a lot more of area in Brampton. You're bringing something that's pulling people from California.
That's right. Yeah, we had 2 ladies flying from Los Angeles for the Friday night concert, and I said, "Why are you here to see a group that you could see in New York? You don't have to pay." And they said, "We've never been, and we love them." And it's those type of connections.
No, and that's fantastic. And I think you're up here today saying we're willing to put the work in.
We have put the work in,
and we're willing to. But the city of Brampton, we're not. We may not be there yet in terms of the measurables and stuff. And I think that's just another line to cross and something to strive for.
You mentioned sustainability as well, and I just want to make a quick point. I think we have to remove that word and replace it with fiscal responsibility, because sustainability now means that back out and you're going. This is not necessarily like businesses that come through Beck. They get a startup, and now you're open every day to sell your wares and to find a way to make income. I told you we're running so many performances during the year. That money is going straight back to the musician. We're paying the musicians for that service.
The good analogy you put that was the regular season, and the jazz festival is the playoffs.
Yeah, so we are sustainable because we're operating year to year, but we're not looking to be sustainable to open a building and to be in business, and now that would warrant the city backing out of their investment. We're saying we're fiscally responsible with your investment. We need this to deliver the product that brings the ROI and the economic impact to the city and the downtown. We're just the subcontractor for doing that. So can we get some sort of guarantee or promise that we will continue to be allowed to do that? That promise and guarantee should be based on our history, our viability, our ROI, our economic impact. That's what we're saying. As the other cities Sudbury 15 years, Guelph 25 years, Orangeville 17 years, these are smaller cities that have found a way to make this work, and that's ultimately what we're asking.
And the last comment I'll make through you, Mr. Chair, and you had mentioned that people are coming to you saying, you're getting 65, you're getting 65.
Yeah.
It's public perception. We know more about public perception, I think, than really anybody.
Yeah.
But it's politics, and Carmen, stay out of the politics.
Yeah, I definitely am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks so much. And just a quick, I had a chance to take a look at your notes. And
was that the right page? Did I give you the right page? Okay, okay.
It was the right one.
All right.
So we're discussing the framework, I guess, today, and there are some recommendations. So just for a question for clarification, is you are looking, your issue is with the fact that I think Councillor Pelletier is going to push some quicker timelines. That's what you need, right?
Well, if we're talking about the report, because I'm here speaking to 7.2,
Yeah.
that's up today.
Yeah.
The report has not essentially done anything to change the competition for those who are already competing, expecting to get $65,000. I said what it's done is it's now raised the threshold to compete from 70% minimum score to 80%. So if we are being asked to continue to compete, there's nothing changing except having to prove ourselves by 10% more. And a lack of guarantee for our existence. So I'm saying after this community grant review that's just been done, the reward for our product is actually more proof. And the rest of the report shows other groups who are being removed from competition and who are being awarded immediately.
Right.
So what I'm saying, now there's a precedent that's been set by staff in this report that we don't have clarification on really because...
Is this because you've been now lumped into the special events group?
I think the marquee, the branch called marquee in 7.2, I would assume that's where we're applying for, because it says that the requirements are that you have to have had 3 years of previous city funding.
Right.
That's highly competitive. So I would assume that will be the field that we will be competing in for 2020.
Right.
But the 7.2.3.4.5, I think it is, takes Santa Claus, Caribbean River Roll and says, no more competition, and here's your 65, basically based on council approval. So that's where...
Yeah. I get it. I get what you're saying. So maybe that's something we should have a discussion on.
I would assume.
Coming up.
Yeah.
But you know, you had mentioned the reason why I asked you to give me the notes is because you said subject again as to why our festival should be funded. You know, I guess to essentially prove why we are relevant to the city, how the festival can instill civic pride. You know, that you'd have to complete an application budget, wait on the city to complete the application reviews. You know, as a person who's, you know, responsible for making decisions on behalf of the taxpayers, I think those are kind of important. But I think that everybody, if one group has to go through, I think everybody should have to, right? But if we can make I think as Councillor Pelletier had mentioned, to maybe make it a little bit quicker for you, to allow you to get some more of your planning, et cetera, done. I think that might be something good to talk about today.
Well, again, I'm speaking to the report with those statements, because back in June, there was a meeting with 8 or 10 of these.
Sorry, what was the first part you said?
I'm speaking to the report with those statements. Because back in June, we were summoned to a meeting by staff, itemizing preferred festivals, with the idea that we would all at some point enter into these type of one-on-one contracts with the city.
Okay.
And we've got 3 today that get those contracts. So I'm speaking to the report.
No, okay, absolutely.
Not to try to circumvent the process. That's not what I'm saying.
No, I appreciate that. So we don't have any, we do have another speaker, Councillor Singh, and then what we'll do after that is move receipt of the delegation and bring the report forward. Councillor Singh, and you're off now. Get back on.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, just wish to advise, so Councillors Santos and Vicente have left. Councillor Bowman has declared a conflict, so there are 5 members of committee present. I just want to remind that under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, because Councillor Bowman declared a conflict on item 7.2.
So are they going?
They're leaving.
Can we not have them come back so we can just finish this item?
No, we do have quorum, because I just want to assure that the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act allows, if a member declares a conflict, a quorum can be reduced. The members present can be under quorum as long as there are a minimum of 2 members. So we are okay to proceed just on this item until Councillor Bowman comes back.
Perfect. Sorry, Councillor Singh, can you get on the board again? Yep. Go ahead.
Am I on? Okay.
Yes.
I just want to summarize because it's been a long. So it's not an issue with the process as so much that you didn't make it in the marquee. That's what we're talking about right now.
I'm assuming if we are going to be asked to continue to compete, that new marquee stream is where we're going to fit.
Okay, that's clear to me, okay.
I was speaking to the hope that we would be guaranteed instead of having to
Yeah,
continue to
so you would
compete
like to
based
be-
on credibility, viability, civic pride, ROI, economic
Yeah.
impact. But the report's not
That's
reflecting
the
that. so-
issue, and you had these discussions and, with staff as well initially.
Yes, back in June, there was a meeting. We were part of 8 or 10 groups in a round table
Okay, all
that
right.
were being proposed.
Thank you, Carmen.
Thanks so much. So there's no other speakers. Councilor Palacios moved receipt of the delegation. All in favor? Thank you so much.
you.
And so,
Thank you, Council.
we're going to bring the report forward now for discussion. 7.2.1. Does anybody want to get on the board for that? No? All in favor? Sure. Councilor Williams.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a few questions. Can we have provided for us the ROI for all the events that we supported? Okay. Yeah. Don't worry, take your time, but hurry up. I'm just kidding.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, just before the question, staff have advised that there is an interrelationship between 7.2.1, 7.2.2, 0.3, 0.4, and 0.5. So we'll still have to deal with them individually in terms of voting.
Okay.
And just a reminder, Councillor Bowman has declared an interest on the first 4, and when we get to the 5th item, sports tourism, Councillor Bowman can rejoin committee.
Sorry, just for the sake of voting, so Councilor Bowman will not partake in the voting portion of it, but even without 6 members minimum, we can still take vote, is that correct?
Yes, committee can still consider the matters.
Okay. All right, Councilor Williams?
Yes. Can we have the ROI for all the events that were held and or the events that we supported financially?
Yes, through the chair. Thank you, Councilor Williams. We do have information. We collect the closeout reports. The current closeout reports are due back to city staff within 6 months of completion of the program. So as we collect the information, we create sort of a bigger narrative around the impact of the program as a whole. So right now we do have information on the 2018 program, but right now we're still in collection phase of the 2019, but happy to share those details.
Okay, so in Toronto, they are able to get Moneris to reveal the growth or decline in sales from their current clients as one measure to see how the King Street streetcar experiment was either hurting or helping businesses on the street. Do we have a relationship with banks and payment companies to get that information for our events and things?
Through the chair, currently we rely on the closeout report that the organizations submit for our ROI, but we do recognize that there is some information that could be, additional information that could be gathered to strengthen that report back, and that's part of the consideration for the 2020 program going forward, is how can the city support better data collection of those organizations. So we are looking at ways for better data collection and reporting so that we can really understand the value of the investment the city is making, not only in the special events category, but in the community grant program as a whole.
Okay. It would be great to get that information and using third party or something that we can collect it, because we know events, especially events that are Brampton based, that have Brampton people living in the city actually put them on. They really do bring back quite a significant investment. I think we heard from the delegation the amount of money that local businesses have benefited from these events. So I'm just wondering, is it not better that we support our culture groups as much as we can financially so that they can book big acts and draw big names and more people to Brampton? So why are we not aligning our financial flow of money with their needs instead of, you know, some of the liability issues and questions we have around City Hall?
Through the chair. As you know, we have a base operating budget of $967,000 for the community grant program, and it goes across not only arts and culture, but the other streams of council priorities. In order for us to look at additional funding support for community organizations, it would require additional support in the community grant operating budget. We're working within the current means that we have.
Okay. So the structure of the program, people apply for it and they could receive the $65,000. But we do have heard more than once that about half of that money comes back to the city in through renting of our space and everything. Why do we include the cost of our rentals in this grant proposal? Why don't we just say we're giving $35,000 and check off on a box what you're going to be using from the city and kind of gauge it that way?
The community program as it operates right now is a cash program. So from a finance and accounting perspective, the advice that we've been given is that it is a cleaner process to value the community grant opportunity, that goes out to the community organizations. Some of those organizations do use city facilities and the dollars do come back to us. But the advice that we've been given from our financial team is it a cash-only program. However, if I have the opportunity to talk about the new framework, the service agreements that we've presented as an opportunity for consideration do allow for more of that cash and in-kind split through a service agreement rather than as part or an element of a community grant program.
Mm-hmm. It seems confusing, and I'm worried about the impression that is given in the community, because it's not $65,000, right? It's really less than that when we think about what they're using. We're getting that money back, right?
Through the chair, for some of the organizations, yes, but not all of the organizations use city facilities or equipment. So in some cases, yes, but not all of the time.
Not all the time. So there are some groups that receive the 65 that spend almost all of the 65, but not on our facilities.
Yes.
That it would be great to get get that breakdown for us.
Sure.
You know?
We'd be happy to look at that and see if we can provide some information. And the program at one time, when it initiated in 2015, did have a cash and in-kind component to it. Mm-hmm. However, we're advised from our corporate services team that a cash granting program is a better methodology for us to be using, a more transparent process.
Okay. So we heard from the delegation that if they were given more time, they would be able to receive or go out farm other sponsors. So when we look at the 65 or the granting process, how are we able to lessen the 65,000 if we're not giving enough time for groups to be able to start securing their own sponsorships and things like that?
Through the chair, the timeline for the distribution of funds is also aligned with the approval of the operating budget to support that grant program. So there's a couple of mitigating or limiting factors that allow us to expedite the timeline. There is a call and information sort of process when we open the community grant program. What we've learned from the community is that there is a lot of value add when we do information sessions, when we have grant writing workshops, sponsorship workshops. So that's all part of the time period while we're open. The staff team here has worked very hard to reduce the time of evaluation, which is really the one thing that's sort of in staff control. Mm-hmm. Then we're mandated to bring the report back to council, so we're sort of affixed to council committee deadlines and ratification as well to bring that back. So there are some factors that we are challenged when we're trying to expedite the process. But that being said, I think that there is some consideration for the Marquee Festival stream to be expedited because it's a smaller, more confined group of organizations. So I take the delegation from Joe and Carmen today into consideration about how we can do that.
Okay, that's good to hear. I think with the delegations, they express concern around you're not having that guarantee, and if we brought them in a room, gave them the impression that they would be on the list of guaranteed funding receiving, then how are we now saying you guys have to compete? I'm just wondering about the messaging in the process, and
Yes, through the chair, there were a number of information sessions held about the community grant program and the review that we were undertaking. One of the conversations around the community grant program is the opportunity for commitments to multi-year funding. However, when we did consultation, when we met with our internal stakeholders, there wasn't sort of comfort with a multi-year funding model at this time. Something that we can explore in the future, but perhaps right now the best way for us to look at the marquee events, some of those long-standing events, is to build out the tourism and destination strategy for the City of Brampton, understand best the return on investment for tourism drivers such as these significant festivals and events, and we'd like the opportunity to bring a refinement to the framework again upon completion of the tourism strategy to talk about ways that we can strengthen the relationship with the festivals and events category in particular. So really we look at this right now as sort of a 1 year, and again in the framework sort of overview, I can show sort of the evolution of this program and where we're hoping to go with this stream of funding in particular.
so you're saying for this year, it could be a competition phase, but as we're collecting more information and refining our process next year, it would be a more secured.
Through the chair, we could look at that opportunity, but again, of course, that would be in consultation with the senior leadership team, with members of council to understand the desire to do multi-year funding agreements or funding guarantees.
Okay. To me, and it would have to be, we really need to get the ROI process sorted out, because I think when you look at how amazing the Jazz Festival, World of Jazz Festival was, and how many people brought into the area compared to, I don't know, the Kite Fest, how many people did that bring? It would be good to know, especially because we know some of the people competing are from outside of the city, may have a P.O. box, we don't know, but we know a lot have roots here in the city, in Brampton, and we really want to be able to promote.
Sure, and through the chair, any sort of reflection in the reports or the framework is not, does not negate or we understand the value of the festival and events sector. We understand the contribution that they make to Brampton's arts and culture program, the local economy, all of those things we advocate for, we're partners with the presenting of these and understand entirely, and would like to build a program that best meets their needs. In the absence of a tourism strategy and strong data collection, it's very hard for us to bring a really strong proposal forward on how to consider longer terms and guarantees, but that really is our intent, to work with the communities in the Marquee Festival category about how to grow and prosper this sector, and to come back for council consideration on ways to improve the way that we work with our partners.
Okay. Well, I'm going to listen to some of the other members of the board. Thank you for answering.
Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Kelly. Kelly, I just want to say, to you and your team, you guys are doing a fabulous job with this. Because in the beginning, there was nothing. Council made all the decisions and cherry-picked who gets what. And then we established the community grant. We basically said to you, do some kind of community grant and take council kind of out of it. And this is what you've brought back. And like I said in the beginning, it's an evolving process, and it'll always be that way, I think. Because, times will change and things will get better, and already you've recognized some of the things that we're going to do better for next year. So that is what I thank you and your team for doing. My comments towards the marquee events and some of the people that are involved with, we've lost quorum. Sorry.
Thank you. We've lost quorum, so.
Charmaine? Okay, we'll wait.
So
we need to recess?
Yeah, we've lost quorum.
All right, so recess for 5 minutes. Recess for.
You can't recess, you can't do anything. So we've lost quorum.
So, what do we do?
I Spy with Milo.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. So quorum has been lost. So under Council's procedural bylaw, we have 30 minutes to re-achieve quorum or the meeting is lost. So, but I just heard, I think the councilor will be back momentarily, and then we can reconvene.
So we'll just wait then. Can we get the Jeopardy music started? You gotta go. So we got quorum again, and I believe Council Pleshy, you were on the, you had the floor?
I did.
Yep.
Major calls, you have to answer.
I get it. What was I talking about?
Councillor Pelletier?
Yes.
If I may, I do have one slide that Peter has as an overview of the program. It may be
Excellent.
helpful if we put that on the screen and I have an opportunity to sort of speak to the reports that are in front of you with a holistic picture. That way we can sort of guide questions back towards the slide.
Perfect.
So what you see in front of you is the number of reports you have. The first one, 7.2.1, being the community grant framework for consideration today, which has two streams, one that's focused on community development, the second that's focused on the marquee festivals, which is what the delegation here today, Carmen, with the World of Jazz Festival, is an organization that would be eligible for and invited to participate in the marquee festival stream. In the next two categories, you see a service agreement category and a sport tourism hosting program. So when the community grant program was first initiated, all of these programs, organizations, and considerations were under one umbrella. Through the review, what we understand is that there are different needs by different organizations at different level requiring different support from the city. And so our recommendation is to separate and address them as individuals in some cases. You'll recall that you received a delegation from both Caribram and Rotary Ribbon Roll earlier this year with a list of asks specifically to council to consider. And so those reports 7.2, 7.3 are in direct response to that referred matter. So the program here, as it states, the community grant program framework, is one that would open upon ratification of this program today. We would look at the opportunity to expedite the marquee festival stream so that we can more rapidly recommend those in that category for funding to help leverage additional sponsorship and the things that the World of Jazz Festival talked about today. The community development would stay on a similar timeline as previous years. That is the 967 that we have in operating for 2020 for the program. The service agreements are a combination of cash and in-kind, and they're really, what we're recommending is looking at these and treating them through a service agreement, which is one of the recommendations in the 2019 KPMG service review, was the utilization of service agreements for granting program. And so we've looked at some of those that require specialized services. They have maybe more complex requirements for city support, and that we would look at a combination, to Councillor Williams' point, of cash and in-kind, because they're heavily using city resources. So that's where you see the Caribram and Rotary Rigmarole. The Brampton Santa Claus Parade that you have in front of you is the same and similar format that we had last year. They have become a really important element of the city's Winter Lights Festival. We work with them under a co-presentation agreement to present and integrate the Santa Claus Parade into the weekend-long festival, and the support that they require is all in kind. There is no cash value to that. And the last section there, the Sport Tourism Hosting Program, is really recognizing that sport tourism hosting is a really significant opportunity for the city of Brampton, and that it doesn't belong within a grant framework, that it really is around bidding and hosting and strategic opportunities. And the recommendation on that report is that the authority be with the Director of Economic Development at a maximum of $50,000 that is in line with the delegated authority currently for outbound sponsorship. So it sort of separates what was under one umbrella now to allow for staff to focus on areas of expertise and delivery, and allow for more specific ways to engage the city in agreements that are appropriate in the types of services that are required.
And then they'll continue to evolve, I guess, over time. And would there be future opportunity for say two events that may have some similarities and could coexist on the same day, come to the city and present, kind of move from a marquee over to more of a sport tourism, where they're actually joining forces to bring something that's really spectacular to Brampton? Is that something that we would?
Through the chair, the intent with the Marquee Festival category is to really build sort of a festival community of artistic directors, executive directors who have real passion for, experience, enthusiasm for the festivals and events category, arts and culture as a whole in the city of Brampton, and that we would create opportunities for networking and professional development for those organizers, and that cross-collaboration and opportunity to look for ways to work together. Quite possibly that Marquee Festival stream would evolve into sort of the right side of the slide that you're seeing now, and that we would consider different types of agreements with those organizations as we evolve in our tourism strategy here at the city.
Good, and I did also want to mention that some of the changes, as opposed, not the higher level changes, but some of the changes in terms of
the granting framework?
Yes, where it had to be the organization from Brampton.
Yes.
And I guess we can have further discussion on what that looks like, because I think it's somewhat of a simple, PO box number to determine. You want to talk about that now?
Through the chair, I'm happy to talk about that. It was one of the things that council asked us to look into this year when we brought our 29 recommendations forward, and so we sought advice from our legal department at that time, and they provided us with a list of acceptable requirements, and it is a PO box in the city of Brampton is not sufficient. That there needs to be a Brampton. The organization needs to be based in Brampton with a permanent address in Brampton that is on their articles of incorporation, that is on their legal documentation. So we have taken that a step further. Certainly we want the organizations to be active and involved and participatory in the Brampton community, but we have moved sort of that needle from ensuring that it's not just a Brampton address on the application, but there is due diligence and legal documentation to support the residency here in Brampton.
And I'm glad there's due diligence,
Yes.
and there's a fine line, because when we're talking about volunteers and,
Yes.
and running programs, they don't have articles of incorporation, but there is that fine line, and I'm glad that you guys have identified that. Additionally, for the fundraising portion and those funds that, if they're raising funds, go back into funds that are needed within the city of Brampton. As much as I love Sick Kids is in Toronto, Aaron Oak Kids is in Brampton, also needing funds. So I'm glad we've identified that as well. And I
Through the
thank you
chair,
for
we're
that.
looking at still the primary intent of the program or project cannot be fundraising, but if there are funds raised in support of, it is a requirement that in the 2020 program that the funds will be redirected back to the city of Brampton.
Great, and thank you for recognizing that the marquee events, you're acceptable to pushing up the timelines. And I've added that into the staff report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, so Councillor Pellecci's moved the staff report with an amendment, and it's shown on the screen.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll get through the speakers list first, and we'll leave that up there for the information of everybody. Councillor Singh?
Yeah, I'm looking, just reading the motion. Okay, and so we received the delegation, correct? We didn't ask for a report. So how does one go about becoming a marquee event now, if they didn't make this list?
Through the chair, any organization that has been funded through the community grant in the established festival category for 3 years or greater are on the marquee list, which includes the World of Jazz.
So they're going to be on the marquee list?
They are eligible, yes, for the marquee festival program stream, yes. Correct.
Okay, so then why did these three come as a report? And
so, through the chair, sort of step back on those ones. You received delegations from both Rotary, Ribbon Roll, and Caribram requesting that staff, and it was referred back to staff to look at a number of items that they would like for consideration for the city. 10 years commitment to funding Brampton Transit shuttles, and a number of things. The reports coming back to you today address what the city is in a position to offer, and that includes a cash and in-kind component. Still at the same level of funding as the Marquee Festival. They're not accessing additional support. However, in order for us to best manage the relationship with those organizations, it's best served through a service agreement rather than a grant agreement. And that's the recommendation that you have in front of you for those.
so those three, because they came through delegations, that's why the reports are here, but other groups still have an opportunity to become marquee events and enter into service agreements.
Through the chair, the Marquee Festival Stream is still an element of the grant program.
Okay.
So they will be applying for, being evaluated, and bringing a recommendation report forward to you. As the motion reads now, we'll be expediting that Marquee Festival Stream to come back as soon as possible. The service agreements in front of you, 7.22, 7.23, 7.24, are for the recommendation for the city to enter into a service agreement with those three organizations.
Because they delegated.
Because, in part, to respond to the delegation, we have to bring that back as a referred matter to you. But because of the terms and conditions and specialized sort of considerations for those events, significant facility usage, access to utilize Gage Park for an event, there's a number of really specific requirements that need to be agreed upon.
So did they go through any process, or we just, they came and delegated and we put them in marquee after, or was there any?
No, through the chair, what you're seeing today is a recommendation that what they delegated towards council is out of scope now for the community grant program.
Got it.
And that our recommendation is to manage them through a service agreement. The funding that supports this, the $55,000 total that supports that bucket, will be drawn from the recommendation is to draw from the reserve, so it does not impact the community grant framework funding.
Okay. And so I did see that most of these are in kind, except maybe Caribram had some cash, right?
Through the chair, Brampton Santa Claus Parade is entirely in kind.
Yep, I saw that.
And Caribram and Rotary both have more significant in kind versus cash allocation.
Okay. And so, I know the work that went into this. Obviously, we met a lot of times. and I was more, I focused on the less than $1,000 grant, so I guess I missed the mark. It's an inside joke, I get it. My concern with Marquee, though, is also this, and just seeing this in other domains, including like sports, for example, when we have these clubs that are affiliated with the city, then they get special consideration for fields, and it keeps new people out, new clubs out. We see this in cricket, we see this in soccer, and so my worry is I don't want this happening in the community grant side of things, where these established groups, have preferential treatment. In a way, they are getting preferential treatment, and over time, they're not innovating, they're not keeping up, and whereas new groups coming in, maybe they're onto something new, and they're going to be kept out of this process. So that's just my only fear with this sort of Marquee approach.
Through the chair, the service agreement allows for additional considerations or partnership opportunities or expectations that would need to be met in order for the city to continue a relationship with. So whereas the grant agreement sort of stipulates the grant agreement based on the application that they've submitted and a closeout report, the service agreements actually allow the city more flexibility in coming to the terms and conditions of the relationship between.
Okay. And so, for example, we just heard from the Jazz, when would they have an opportunity to become a marquee? So I just want to understand the process, because when I see these names, I do think they deserve to be.
Through the chair, to clarify, World of Jazz is in the Marquee Festival stream.
Okay.
Are you asking when they would have an opportunity to become engaged with the cities through a service agreement and outside of the program? Through the chair, we're looking at right now the development of Brampton's first tourism strategy, which we know there's a real opportunity around festivals and events in the city, and perhaps sort of the moniker of a festival city. We're looking to have that consultant work talk about the opportunity for support for festivals as a whole. So as you'll see sort of in the marquee festivals, I've got a sort of in brackets there a program stream for 2020. The intent is to have this program here to allow for access to funding similar to that they've had previously on a more expedited timeline at Council's request today. But that the tourism strategy and work we do over the next year will help us define if there's greater opportunity to look at service agreements as a whole under a tourism mandate. So it is part of the continued work, to Council Peleshi's earlier point, as this program evolves. Ultimately, the goal would be to have the community development stream as the only stream within the community grant program framework, and that the marquee festivals would sit over with the other service agreements and sport tourism hosting.
Okay. But I didn't get, so when will they have the opportunity? I didn't get a timeline in there. Like, so in the next few months, or? It's captured in the?
Sorry, through the chair, if I'm understanding.
Can I see the
Councillor
motion
Singh.
again? Sorry, maybe I missed
It's
it.
okay. Sorry, if I'm understanding your question, though, you're asking about the timeline for which they may be considered in a
Into a
different
service
program.
agreement. No, into a service agreement when?
So that would be upon, yes, that would be upon
End of 2019?
us as staff bringing a recommendation report for the 2021 program in the fall of 2020 for your consideration. So the idea would be for the next funding year.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So just a reminder as well that we are discussing 7.2, 0.3, and 0.4 as well. And so if you do have questions, you can ask them, but we will be voting on them individually. Councilor Medeiros?
Thank you, through the chair. First of all, thank you to staff. I know, again, I always commend you, and I feel sorry for you at the same time. This is probably one of the most difficult sort of initiatives that we do here at the city. And I guess I don't know where to start. There's, I think the back and forth from council, what I've seen over the last couple of years is that, you know, on one end, we wanted councillors not to be engaged in the process and make it non-political, but then after we get sort of engaged, and then we start and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because one thing that councillors bring to the table is we know many of these organizations. We know sort of the backstory. We know who has that impact or so on. And, I made these comments years ago, I guess, when we first launched it. The type of oversight. I know when we do the evaluation, it's a group of, I believe, is it staff who do the evaluation? Internal staff, and any outside people that do the evaluation as well?
Through the chair, we've had a variety of evaluation panels over the last couple of years, and we're looking at a model now that brings subject matter expertise both on council priority and sort of subject matter expertise if it's a festivals event versus an arts and culture versus a recreation program. So we're looking at refining that evaluation again, but the likelihood is that it will be primarily internal review and perhaps external opportunity where we may have a service gap inside.
So through the chair, I've always wondered, again, how can we ensure some, I would say, council oversight on some of these decisions and initiatives? I'm not sure my colleagues around the table, but, I would always be tempted to put forward a motion that we have, for example, a chair of economic development and community services, both chairs be part of the process evaluation, or have two members of council who voluntarily, and the reason why I think that is, instead of when we get to council and it becomes this big back and forth and why not this, that we have councillors who provide some of that, political coloring of some of these organizations, who can sort of connect with us to avoid us always coming here and putting on, this back and forth. And, I'd be tempted to do that. I haven't had a chance to consult with my colleagues, so maybe there'll be an opportunity at council if when we revisit and make the final decision, but I'd like to float that as one possibility. Second thing, and I've mentioned to staff on terms of how we do these grants programs and what we're funding for what, and I know a lot of this stuff is grandfathered based on history and tradition with the city. So I give, for example, when we hear a jazz festival, economic development, impact on the city, businesses are and then you have a festival that does an internal festival. They use vendors. I'm not sure if they're Brampton vendors. And that economic development isn't hitting the city. It's great for the organization. And then what I found is the organization, after it goes away and does a donation of $30,000, $40,000 of basically the money that we basically provided them, or provided in kind. So my question is, why support it? Why didn't we just go on behalf of the city and give $40,000, $50,000 to that same organization or to the hospital? So, those are type of the controls. And then after the political stuff, some organizations, so I don't know when you enter, I could tell you there was a festival last year, in my ward, who did not invite me because of political, I guess, considerations of people on their board. And so on one end, we're engaged with the city. At the same end, some of these organizations, when they get into that type of sphere, so, and it's nothing against the event per se, but then after there has to be, where's that oversight? What expectation can you have? I would assume that everyone who works with the city should be neutral, not be political. There has to be this non-biased approach, and there has to be this economic impact that we talk about. So what justifies us giving a certain amount of money to an organization that basically the economic impact is nothing or is very little? I guess what we're saying is that we're attracting people to the downtown, and that evaluation becomes, a difficult task. And I actually had Councillor Williams suggest, why don't we get a third party to do the evaluation of doing some form of audit? So I know those are considerations. I don't want to throw them on the table now and have us run around without some more thoughtful consideration. But those are sort of the type of challenges that we have. From our end is that we look at some of the events and we see the impact, and after some of the other events, just because they've been around for 20, 30 years, understandably, just because that back in the day they were in favor with certain members of council, those are no longer here, and then we know different organizations. We know the economic impact across the city, is questionable. And, how marquee are some of these events is questionable as well. So with that said, I guess, this, again, it's a bunch of nothing I've said, so I'm sorry to take up everyone's time and space, but it's just considerations, I think, that before it comes to council next week, or we don't have it, but the week following, I think I'll be, consulting with my colleagues on a couple of these aspects to see exactly if we should have members of council involved in the process to avoid us coming with all these surprises back and forth. And council wants this oversight. At least if we have council representation there, there's that connection with, some of our council priorities and thoughts and so on. So, go ahead. Thank you.
I was just recommending that if it's something that you want to have for the next cycle of applications, perhaps you could even move something, or maybe.
Yeah, I'll give it some thought, and maybe at council I might pull it, but I'll make sure I consult with staff as well.
Right, okay, so we don't have any more speakers, and we do have the recommendations for 7.2.1 moved by Councilor Pelletier. There is an added recommendation number 5. So we want to vote everything as a whole? Yep, okay. So all in favor of 7.2.1, the recommendations are on the screen, 1 to 5. I got 2, I got 3, that carries. So we're going to bring forward 7.2.2 up to 7.2.4. We're going to vote on them individually. So 7.2.2 is moved by, okay, question. Councilor Pelletier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I realized you wanted to ask all the questions prior to, but my question wasn't relevant to the other one. So I just wanted to ask staff if you can walk me through the splitting of the in-kind and the cash, how that determination comes about. It doesn't have to be for each one, but how do we get to that split?
Sure, through the chair. The split and recommendation for both 7.2.2 and 7.2.3 are based on prior events and history in the city of Brampton. So because we have closeout reports and budgets for prior years, and they are well-established festivals, we have an idea of the city facility and equipment required to operate. So the numbers are based on that split, historical split.
And then do we have the discussion, much like this one for Caribram, we talk about what that split looks like?
Yes.
And it's just it's a conversation that we had. If we need to make adjustments, we can make adjustments?
Through the chair, there is some flexibility in if the cash contribution had to come back to the city to pay for additional city fees, the flexibility is still there on how.
So if something else changed, we change with it. Perfect. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Singh.
Hi, I'd like to suggest something to my colleagues. It's an important decision, 7.2.2, 7.2.3, and 7.2.4. Given some of the comments said in the delegation, I'd ask if we could defer this to the next committee council meeting, and we can have other councilors here as well and have a more wholesome discussion about this part in particular.
So you're recommending
Deferral
of 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4?
Yeah. All the, three of them.
Sorry, just to staff, is there anything that's, are you guys okay with that? Or is there anything that's really pending right now that you need approval?
Through the chair, the 7.2.2, 7.2.3, it's similar in that these organizations will be waiting for council's commitment to start their planning. 7.2.4, the Santa Claus Parade, is a bit separate and distinct. It's similar to the model that we've done in the past, and it's an element of the tree lighting winter lights festival weekend. So the Santa Claus Parade is an integrated element to our city-led festival. There is some impact there with the Santa Claus Parade report.
Thank you, and I'll take that into consideration. So if we could defer 7.2.2 and 7.2.3, and I'm okay to vote on the Santa Claus.
So can we move them both at once?
Procedural motion is in order to move both 7.2.2 and 7.2.3 to the October 16th Committee of Council meeting.
Yep, so it's been referred, to defer it.
Yep.
Move to defer to October 16th for more
Yeah, also
wholesome
discussion, and other
discussion.
councillors should also be here.
Right? Okay, that's moved by Councillor Singh.
It's not
Sorry.
debatable.
It's not debatable. All in favor? Carries. 7.2.4 is moved. Recommendations are on the screen. Moved by Councillor Medeiros. You guys all good? All in favor? Carries.
So, Mr. Chair, we just need to have Councillor Bowman return for 7.2.5.
Right. Thank you so much. Councillor Bowman is back. And so we're going to bring forward 7.2.5. Are there any questions or concerns or comments or suggestions? None? Oh, sorry, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through you, Chair. A question about the sports tourism. How many organizations have come forward seeking this, or is there a list of groups that would likely fall into this area in this pot of funding?
Sure, through the chair. Historically, it would take a minute for me to reference sort of how many people have received, but in the current 2019 program, there is a recreation stream that a number of the sport tourism programs go through. The key differentiating factor now of this program is that it prioritizes sport tourism. Thank you. It prioritizes sport tourism as a specific genre sort of within the recreation, and that it is has criteria that's nationally sort of used through the Canadian Sport Tourism Alliance. So this is really looking at economic impact and dollars that are being brought into the community. So it really is separate and distinct from a community granting program. In 2015, there were 3 sport tourism events, 2016, 54, 2017, 31, 2018, 52, 2019, 26 year to date. So it is a significant portfolio and opportunity for the city of Brampton.
So you said 2019, 52?
26. 2018, 52 events, 8,500 room nights for an economic impact of $1.1 million.
Which groups were they? Are they certain teams, or if you can kind of just highlight who has come forward? Is it candidates would be one, right?
Through the chair, yes.
Yeah, so who
It's a
else?
number of sport organizations. I couldn't talk to the specifics
Oh, okay.
unless Linda's still here. We could talk about some of the specifics of
got
it,
it.
but they are sort of sport-sanctioned events, and they have a specific level of play: provincial, national, international, and regional.
Okay.
Yes, so it's a very sort of quantifiable category.
Okay. It would be great just to get a rundown of who those groups are, because we know we have different groups coming to us or asking questions, but if they're receiving already, it'd just be good for our information.
Yeah, sure.
To be able
Through the
to get
chair,
that
we'd be
sense.
happy to provide a more robust sort of history on the program and opportunities that we're looking at going into 2020.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Singh?
I just wanted to thank staff for their work on this. I think it was much needed, the framework, and it's good. Just so we know, because we know a lot of sports organizations as well, who sort of is responsible for this portfolio? Is this you directly, or?
No.
No, okay.
Through the chair, no. This is not my area of
Okay.
expertise.
No, I saw your name on the report, that's why I thought maybe.
No. The sport tourism hosting program falls within the tourism office, which falls within the cultural services division.
Okay.
So Laura Lukasik is the manager of tourism, and Linda Olimer is our coordinator of sport tourism specifically. So there is a dedicated staff who manages this portfolio, and we'll be working directly with Claire on opportunities for bidding and hosting in the city of Brampton.
Okay, no, I'm working with the group. They want to do the first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament in Brampton. So.
Through the chair, that's exactly what we're here for.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. There's no other questions, so the recommendations are on the board, moved by Councillor Williams. Yep, all in favor? That carries. So we're on to,
Through you, Mr. Chair. So committee agreed at the beginning, after dealing with the delegation and the items related to the delegations, that committee would move into closed session.
right,
So that is the next item before committee.
so it's 11:41, we're gonna move into closed session. Would we need to come back to break for lunch, or?
Lunch is available, so if committee wishes to break for lunch, to get lunch and reconvene in closed sooner rather than later, that's entirely up to the committee.
Reconvene where?
I would suggest that 11:40, if councilors are okay with getting their lunch earlier, we can reconvene in camera at 12:30.
Yep, that sounds good. So we'll reconvene in closed session at 12:30 then. Okay? Welcome back, everybody. We're going to report out. I'm going to ask the clerk to let us know what happened in closed session.
Mr. Chair, there were two items in closed session. 13.1 was information explicitly supplied in confidence to the municipality or local board by Canada, province, or territory, or a Crown agency, or any of them, and a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. As a result of consideration in closed session, there was direction given to staff as well. There are two motions which are on the screen which require a mover and then are to be voted on in public.
So the motion is on the screen and we need a mover, right?
Yes.
So let one of the... You want to move it? All right. Councilor Singh moves it. All in favor?
Carries. The second item was 13.2.
Not in your book.
And that item was considered in closed session and no direction was given. It's a litigation or potential litigation matter.
I believe we're still on economic development. Added item 7.3.2. So can we, there's a motion, can we get it on the board?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the next item is 7.3.2, a discussion item on the entrepreneurial support in the city of Brampton. And there is a motion which you are introducing.
Yep, so working with staff who introduced this motion, I had a chance to email everybody beforehand. It's in regards to entrepreneurial support in Brampton, and so I'll read it out for you that staff within the Economic Development in Brampton Entrepreneur Center team prepare a high-level feasibility study, including budget implications by the end of Q2 2020 to determine the types of entrepreneurial support that is needed across the city, including use of city-owned and/or provision of leased space, programming, support, mentoring, workshops, and seminars. And so I know Councillor Singh has been active on this file in moving towards looking to see if we can provide some of these entrepreneurial supports through the rest of Brampton. And so I know we do have some downtown. There's a very, there is a, particularly speaking about youth in the East End and on the West End as well, there's an appetite for these type of supports. And so I think it's appropriate, and I think it's appropriate that we look into expanding on it. And so the motion is on the board, and Councillor Bowman, you're next.
Thank you very much through you, Mr. Chair. Just seeing the motion now, I don't really have an issue in it. I'm just wondering if it can be, the way you've described it, Councillor, is the potential growth of our entrepreneurial services into other areas of the city? Is that what you mean by this?
Yeah, so to expand on some of the opportunities and resources available as well.
Oh, okay, I'm just wondering if that can be somehow put in there, the expansion of entrepreneurial support, rather than, because to me this reads we're going to be doing an in-depth dive up to what we're currently doing to see if it's really required. That's how I read it. So if we put in there the expansion of our entrepreneurial across the city, that would make, it's a friendly if you...
Yeah. So read it. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Second thing I just wanted to ask, I don't even know who to direct this to, maybe Al. When we're asking them to do this, but at the same time within the next 5 months, we're also asking for an in-depth third-party audit of everything they're doing. Can those two go hand in hand? Because I don't want economic development to be going gung-ho and saying, here's how we need to expand, here's what we need to do, and the auditor to come back with findings that differ from what economic development wants to proceed with.
Through the chair, I'll take a stab at it, and then Claire can sort of clarify if she feels the need. From my perspective, I see them complementary. So really the deep dives that the consultants are doing are looking at sort of our current processes, looking for some efficiencies. What this motion is really asking staff to do is sort of look at the possibility of expanding the good things that are happening now in terms of entrepreneurial efforts, and determining the feasibility of expanding that to other areas of the city. So right now the Economic Entrepreneurial Center is in the downtown. We're going to look at the feasibility and the demand in terms of the possibility of expanding that. Once we've determined that, we will come back before June of 2020 with some recommendations for council's consideration. And that time, then it'll be council's point to make a decision on how to proceed based on the recommendations that staff will be bringing forward. So
okay.
I see them complementary.
All I'm looking to avoid is to have two groups of people working on two different reports that might end up at cross purposes at some point, because theoretically, and I'm just saying this theoretically, if an audit comes back and says that, best practice is to look at this method of doing entrepreneurial leadership, and we're looking at a expanded different method of doing entrepreneurial leadership, then we have to decide between what the auditor's saying and what our economic development department is saying. And I don't want that to happen, because I think economic development has a lot more important things to be doing, especially with all the trips that we're taking lately. So I just want to make sure that we're not crossing anything here, and that we're going to be doing a duplication of effort at some point. That's my, okay, thank you.
And I will just add that, perhaps I should have mentioned it earlier, that eventually, and perhaps Claire could even confirm that the BEC is going to outgrow itself, or that is the plan soon, for it to outgrow itself. And so I think looking at the possibilities down the road, at least, is something that this council should do. And so I'm going to get Councillor Singh on the board.
Yeah, I just want to say in support of this motion that, you brought a much more collaborative approach, looking at the whole city. I was being more specific, looking at the east end of Brampton. I know Councillor Williams has talked about potentially looking at sites at Riverstone or Gore Meadows, as I have advocated. But it's good we're looking at the whole of Brampton. This does, I don't want to lose sense of the fact that this also sort of still stems from that iconic delegation. Initially, this was one of their requests, especially in the east side of Brampton. But I'm happy to look at all of Brampton. I think that's a good approach, and I will support this motion.
Thank you. And Councillor Williams did agree that we could rule out Ward 7 and 8. It will be in Ward 9 and 10. Just joking. And so there's no other speakers. The motion is on the board, moved by myself. Do you want to move it? Sid, you all right? Okay, so moved by myself. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. So the next item is 7.3.3. It's the FDI mission to Turkey, and there is a motion. And so as the chair of economic development, I had a number of discussions with the mayor and who felt that there should be a representative for the upcoming delegation, the mission that's going to Turkey with the Canada-Turkey Business Council. And so I'll read the motion for you. If anybody has questions or comments, we can do that after. Whereas the City of Brampton and the Chair of Economic Development have been invited to the 16th Annual Trade and Investment Conference by the Canada-Turkey Business Council in Istanbul, Turkey. Therefore, staff within economic development be directed to coordinate an FDI mission with the Canada-Turkey Business Council, and the mission be added to the approved FDI missions for the City of Brampton. And I believe it's moved by Councilor Vicente. It's moved by Councilor Vicente. Councilor Bowman.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. Just very briefly again, it says here be added to the FDI mission. Does that mean that we are going to incorporate that into the existing FDI budget, or that we're asking for an increased budget for the FDI trips?
Claire, do you want to just come down real quick?
Through the chair, it's the existing budget. We're not through the existing budget. We're not requesting additional funding.
Okay, so this is through an existing, the FDI that we've already approved. And what was that, 1.8 million or something?
1.6, or I think it was 1.68 or 1.86. Okay, 600 approved for the year.
Okay, 600 approved for the year. Okay, and is this the same trip that is being done in conjunction with Badar Shamim, and I don't know if the Board of Trade's involved in that or not, but that's the same one? Okay, thank you.
Right, and again, this was at the request of the mayor for Representative to go. And so the motion is on the board, moved by Councilor Vicente. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. So we are done the items. We're on to correspondence. There's none. Councilor's question period. Does any councilor have any questions regarding the economic development agenda? None. Oh, we do. Councilor Vicente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to ask the question as part of the previous motion, but now it's just as good. Perhaps the staff could just comment for members of council on the value that they see in having members of council and the city participate in these types of foreign development missions and excursions. We just have a brief commentary on the value that they provide.
Thank you. Sure, so just to clarify the question, it's an opinion about councilors traveling on these missions and the city?
Yeah, staff.
As staff?
Yes.
So as staff, it's critical to deliver foreign direct investment, to have these meetings face-to-face. For councilors and the mayor to travel, I would think it's dependent on the country you're going to and the sectors. So for example, the one that we're planning for Portugal, because of the language change and different business cultures, it's critical to have them there as well.
Okay. If I see other questions on the board, I'll allow them.
Councillor Singh, questions?
Yeah, Claire, I don't think you were here then, but Toronto Global also came and we had a robust discussion, and just wanted to follow up. Have they been engaged with their FDI strategy, and are they facilitating and helping out? Just wanted to see what their involvement has been.
Sure, so their work is definitely aligned with ours.
Okay.
We're not crossing over.
Okay.
We will be at maybe one of the same conferences as them this year.
That's it, okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
But we do have someone assigned on our team who's responsible for that relationship and that agreement.
Okay.
Our team is really determined to ensure that they know our value proposition.
Yeah.
And that they are really bringing us the leads that we need and that we want, and not just giving us something
Yeah.
because they need to meet their 25%.
Okay, it's good you're tracking that, because I'm pretty sure there'll be another robust conversation
Yeah.
when they come back.
Yes.
So, thank you.
I would just add that we did unanimously pass the FDI strategy a few months back, and we welcome your leadership, Claire.
Thank you.
Things are looking very optimistic now, and I know particularly the mayor has been a big fan of FDI. We've been pushing the strategy, and we've had a lot of great feedback on it, so we look forward to continuing the strategy and work going forward. And so there's no other questions. And now we move to corporate services. Sorry, not yet. Is there any member of the public who has a question in relation to the economic development portion of the agenda? Seeing none, we're going to move on to corporate services.
All right, thank you, Councilor Dillon. Moving on to the corporate services section, seeing 8.3.1 was in consent and 8.3.2 was in consent. We'll move on to 8.3.3, a discussion at the request of Councilor Williams on street hockey on Brampton residential streets. There's also corresponding item 8.3.5, which we'll receive for receipt after discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of council. So I have a jersey on today. Today marks the opening game of the Toronto Maple Leafs at the Scotiabank Arena, and they take on the Ottawa Senators, and the puck drops at 7 p.m. So I know everyone, especially Councillor Bowman, will be watching because he's such a fan. So you and I know that almost every single player on the Leafs bench and probably on the Senators bench too started their career in the most unusual place. Not in a hockey arena, not on a pond, and not even on a backyard rink, but they started their NHL dreams playing street hockey. That's right, I said street hockey. So they imagined they were scoring the winning goal in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup. Fingers crossed, the Leafs will win the Stanley Cup in Game 7 this year, and we will all be watching at Garden Square, just like we did the Toronto Raptors. I know that's what we're all hoping, especially Councillor Bowman. So, Mr. Chairman, the street hockey is where NHL dreams are born. And as a child, I remember growing up playing with my brother and my sister and other kids from my neighborhood in the C-section. We would be riding our bikes, playing tag, playing hide-and-go-seek, playing basketball, but most of all, we were playing street hockey. And we would be on the street with our hockey sticks, burning energy. Someone would yell, "Car!" And when the goalie would move the net out of the way, put the net back, and someone would yell "car," and the goalie would move the net out of the way, then put it back after the car pass and yell "game on." And I know most of us are familiar with this strategy because we all used to do it, and the game would just continue. In the lead up to today's council meeting, I discovered that Brampton does not prohibit street hockey, but it does prohibit playing street hockey with a net. How can you practice scoring the winning goal in a Game 7 without a net? This is part of the bylaw. This part of the bylaw is what stops kids from dreaming about playing in the NHL and winning the Stanley Cup. Street hockey and other sports are a big part of our culture, and we see fewer and fewer kids at play. I know from watching my own kids and their friends that many teams are getting more screen time and less ice time. The result is very strong thumbs, but not very strong bodies. Less physically active children are at higher risk of developing chronic issues such as type 2 diabetes, mental health issues, and are unable to maintain a healthy weight. Unhealthy children grow into unhealthy adults with multiple health issues. The city of Brampton, as we know, has the highest diabetes rate in Ontario, and it's no wonder why. We are discouraging kids from playing outside. Promoting physical activity in young children helps them to develop healthy habits, which can help minimize the occurrence of developing chronic health issues and put less strain on our severely underfunded healthcare system. My motion is about encouraging Brampton residents to be more active and to encourage people to participate in the next spring's national competition put on by Participaction. The last competition awarded a $150 cash prize to Canada's most active community. There were also $20,000 in cash prizes to finalists from all regions of Canada. This is a great incentive to get Brampton residents more active, engage in a national campaign, and if we win, dedicated resources to help improve some community assets. We could even find sponsors who could match the amount won by the community. So, through the chair, today's marks the start of the NHL season for Toronto Maple Leafs on the long road to the Stanley Cup. But it is also the start of street hockey season and Brampton's march on the long road to a healthier community if we support this motion. I'm asking staff to report on using street hockey as a primary means to get Brampton to compete in the Participaction's 2020 program, and so we can bring home the Stanley Cup, and I mean, actually not the Stanley Cup, but $150,000 prize, but the Stanley Cup would be great too. Street hockey is a rite of passage for many people, spelled right, R-I-T-E, but in Brampton, we want street hockey to be the rite of passage, spelled R-I-G-H-T. Because Brampton prohibits the right to play street hockey with a net, we are denying kids the right to play and dream big. So let's make Brampton the street hockey capital of Canada. Go Leafs, go. So the motion has been sent to the clerk. So I'll just read through this motion. So whereas Wednesday, October 2nd marks the opening game of the Toronto Maple Leafs National Hockey League season at Scotiabank Stadium. Again, go Leafs go. And whereas most NHL players started their journey to professional hockey playing by street hockey, and whereas Brampton is one of the few municipalities in the GTA and Ontario that do not prohibit street hockey, although street hockey is still permitted, we don't see as many kids at play. And whereas Brampton is the 9th largest municipality in Canada, and by virtue of its size and population, Brampton is the street hockey capital of Canada. And whereas street hockey is a rite of passage for many young people growing up in Canada and Brampton. Whereas street hockey is not prohibited in the City of Brampton bylaw, and thus some consider it to be a rite of passage. And whereas the use of hockey nets is prohibited under the Boulevard Maintenance and Highway Obstruction Bylaw 163-2013 or 2013. And whereas active play is a recommended method to improve the health and well-being of youth and children. And whereas active and healthy lifestyle choices have personal and community benefits. And whereas Participation held a Community Better Challenge across Canada for the most active community in 2019 and awarded a prize money of $150,000 to the winning community. And whereas Participation also awarded 20,000 second prizes to 5 other communities. And whereas the children of this generation are less physically active due to widespread use of technology and an increase in screen time. And whereas it has been said that the increase in screen time has led to stronger thumbs but not stronger bodies. Whereas less physically active children are at higher risk of developing chronic health issues such as type 2 diabetes, mental health, and are unable to maintain a healthy weight. Less physically active children are more likely to develop multiple health issues as adults. Whereas promoting physical activity in young children helps them to develop healthy habits, which can help minimize the occurrence of developing chronic health issues and put less strain on our severely underfunded healthcare system. Whereas activities like street hockey are aligned with the principles of the Healthy Communities Initiatives, HCI, and whereas street hockey can be one of the many outdoor activities in which residents can participate and be counted towards active minutes in the Participation Community Better Challenge. Therefore, be it resolved that the Brampton City Council express its commitment to encourage safe, active play, and further, the Brampton City Council reminds residents that safe, active play on the residential streets of Brampton is not prohibited, including but not limited to street hockey and other sports and creative games. And further, Brampton staff be instructed to report ways to amend the Boulevard Maintenance and Highway Obstruction Bylaw 163-2013 to allow for the temporary placement of hockey nets and or basketball nets. And further, Brampton Council directs staff to investigate the opportunity for Brampton to compete as a community in the 2020 Participation Community Better Challenge and report back to the Committee of Council no later than April of 2020. And further, that such report consider the benefits of securing corporate sponsorship to enhance the competition and or prize money as an incentive to get Brampton more active. Go Leafs go! That's a lot of reading. Thank you. Yeah, sure. All right, let me get started.
To you. Okay, just want to give everybody a minute to read their fourth. All right, Councilor Medeiros.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councilor Williams, for bringing that forward. I remember when I was newly elected in 2014, it was also to my surprise that ball hockey was not prohibited, having grown up. But I must confess, in the last couple of years, I've not witnessed any kids playing hockey anymore. But with that said, that doesn't take away from how I think positive steps this is. I guess my question to staff, you guys would know you guys know that there was activity going on, sports activity, but yet it was prohibited. What is the rationale behind it? Is there liability? Is it because, and I guess the other consideration is, again, I know certain parts of the city here in Brampton, especially our downtown areas, we get calls for constant drive-through traffic, speeding, and that's a huge challenge. So on one end, we're fighting all this incoming traffic and speeding, and we're constantly doing traffic studies, and then we're going to be endorsing this. Does that put us on the hook in any way? Or is this, because the idea is great, but now, I'd like to hear from staff from any sort of considerations that we might, legal and so on. So I don't know where to start, if it's Public Works, if it's legal, or...
So I did have a very brief conversation with Mike. I'm going to have Mike start, and then perhaps he'll pass it over to me, and I can make some comments as well.
Thank you.
Through the chair, the intent of a roadway is to actually move traffic, move people. So although I wasn't involved in creating the bylaw related to obstructions of road, I would have to assume that at the time it was related to people obstructing roads, inhibiting people from being able to use it for its intended purpose. As far as the safety issue, that's a big issue, which then also equates into liability. So I would maybe suggest that our solicitor speak to that. Just one last thing, though. The way it's written, this resolution is written now, it probably needs to be changed a little bit to clear that piece up around that it's permitted on, it's not prohibited on roadways, because in actual fact, obstructing a roadway is prohibited.
So there's no need, sorry, through the chair, there's no need for changes then, if it's prohibited. I mean, it's allowed. Is that what you said?
No, in actual fact, obstructing the roadway by way of playing sports, hockey nets, basketball nets, is in fact prohibited.
Okay.
But in this resolution, as I see it, it says is not prohibited. Safe and active play on residential streets of Brampton is not prohibited. So that would have to be amended.
And changed to it's prohibited.
Right, correct.
Okay.
So through the chair, I really do want to be careful about what I say in open session in terms of the liability and responsibility of the corporation in terms of accidents or other things that could happen within our right-of-way. We just had a bit of a discussion about that earlier. We are responsible for what occurs within the right-of-way. I'm somewhat conflicted here because obviously it is the first night of the hockey season, and I am a Leafs fan, so it makes it difficult for me to say anything that derogates from this. But I think just echo a couple of things. One, Mike's comment, and that is the spirit of this is great, but there are some provisions here that are a little bit iffy in terms of what the bylaw provides and what it doesn't provide for. So the bylaw provides that you can't obstruct the highway. I don't believe it says that you can't play hockey, but if playing hockey is deemed to be an obstruction of the highway, then that could be an issue. The other thing to keep in mind, without having all of this specifically referenced in the bylaw, because I know that some municipalities actually do prohibit the playing of sports and so on within the right-of-way expressly. They actually come out and say that. I do not believe that our bylaw does. But the other thing to keep in mind is that, and Paul is here from enforcement, we do apply a good amount of discretion in terms of how we enforce our bylaws. It's basically a complaints-based system. And so if you've got, I would imagine, a number of kids playing hockey on the street, which we all have done, and some of us have even broken windows and stuff doing that, if you don't get complaints, you really don't have a problem. And so, you have to keep that in mind as well. If you'd like to go in camera to get additional advice, we can certainly do that. Paul may have some comments as well. But in addition to all of that, through the chair, there may be an opportunity for me to kind of tweak some of this language that may keep us safe from the corporate perspective, while at the same time encouraging active lifestyles and participation and so on and so forth.
And I guess to, thank you. I guess to the member of the motion, if you can give me background, what is participation? What is the Community Better Challenge?
Yeah, so participation, it is, they actually have the challenge. So participation, I believe, is a federally funded entity that encourages activity. And they used to have those videos, participation, the two people, yeah. Yeah, and they would do the videos to encourage healthy lifestyle and community.
But
So
was
they've
this
actually.
like two people that would do the?
Yes, that's right. That's
Okay.
right. Yeah, so they have this initiative, Better Challenge, Community Better Challenge, that we could participate in.
So I guess to staff, I guess, thank you, I appreciate
No
it. To John, would you need more time just to work with the mover of the motion to bring this back, or do you think would warrant the staff report to come back for council's consideration?
Yeah.
Would you be okay with that?
I would, yeah, this is just for the report to come back for us, yeah.
Okay, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't understand. I was just about to ask for clarification. Because you're
okay with that?
what I'm hearing.
Fine with the referral? Come back
Yeah,
for-
you're okay with the referral?
And we'll come back to council, next council meeting? Or next committee? Is there time?
Well, the report is saying to come back.
Oh, the report says, okay,
Yeah.
that's fine then. So no referral because it's asking for a report, right?
It's a report.
Okay, we're gonna hold a referral till everybody else speaks as well, if we want to do that.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. This is an interesting proposal. Participaction's a great organization. I sit on HDI, so I'm interested in anything we can do to help get people active. But I'm also keenly aware of what's going on in our streets, what's going on larger streets, arterial roads. I personally have never played hockey on a highway. Most of the road hockey and stuff that I've seen are usually played in courts, where there's a big round circle that the kids can play in. Just to go, this may seem like a strange question to bylaw, Paul. How many tickets have we given to kids for playing hockey on a street?
Be honest, Paul. In recent memory, tell us.
None. Basketball?
Again, none.
Again, none. Okay.
You guys aren't doing your job.
No, I'm just asking that because really, to a lot of people, this seems like it seems like a no-brainer. But I fully understand the implications of our legal liabilities. So
through you, Mr. Chair, it really does bring an interesting conversation to place here, because we're talking about something very specific. We're talking about hockey, and it's near and dear to me. My daughter played high level hockey. But that's not the only thing that goes on in the streets. So I can remember a year ago, I had an issue with a complaint. It was another counselor who complained to me, and we would try to address the issue of a young child who had a motorized vehicle, a miniature vehicle, and he's driving it on the streets. It's completely different from hockey, but it's not completely different than use of the roadway. So whatever we do moving forward, keep in mind, we have to be very broad-based about this. And it's just not hockey and just not moving a net off the street. So the second part of that is when we use our discretion, I want to make sure that we're very clear what that discretion allows us to do. Because when we start saying you can do this and you can't do that, we get quite often criticized. So we need to remember to keep the definitions and the expectations very, very clear and concise moving forward, because this will be a very much liability setup for us.
correct. And from what I'm not a lawyer, but from what my understanding of obstruction was the blocking, the disallowing of traffic to go through, whereas people playing on the streets and kids playing on the streets, they move their nets, they let the traffic go through, and then they start playing again. So it is a little bit different. But I was going to ask about that. Kids play a lot of stuff on the street. Kids learn to ride their bicycles on our streets. And we've got to balance this out now with, we want kids to be active. We want them out playing. We want them out of their basements. We want to strengthen more than just their thumbs. But on the other side of it, we've got roads where we've got back-to-back cars parked on both sides of the street. Most of them, a lot of times, are illegal. And we simply can't get around to ticket all these vehicles. So we're weighing, the streets are there. Taxpayers pay for the streets. Taxpayers, in a lot of cases, are parents with kids who want to use the street as well. And again, we've got everything going on the streets. Everything. So to your point, Paul, about having to make hard and fast rules, I think it's going to be next to legally impossible to make a hard and fast rule in this case. So I think all we can do is encourage best safety practices on our streets. And if kids are playing, we need to let them know that there's going to be cars and vice versa. But, I was speaking to a person about 3 weeks ago, actually, and they told me that they felt it was more dangerous for kids to play on the street today because drivers see less and less people playing on the streets, so they take it for granted nobody's out there. So they just speed up and drive through. Whereas if more kids were out on the streets, maybe more drivers would take the time, slow down, and pay attention to the rules of the road. I don't know. But this is a very difficult, either way, this is one of these things we can't do the right thing, but we can certainly do the wrong thing. And it's going to be a difficult time to balance it. I'm all for going for participation. And whether we limit it to court areas, whether we limit it to tennis courts, I know that sometimes our tennis courts get locked so that kids can't play road hockey in our tennis courts. Very difficult to do, so I will wait for the report to come back and just see what John recommends, because then it's all on him. Thanks very much.
Do you have anything to add?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. It's interesting the comments you make about the tennis courts being locked, because quite often these activities take place after dinner. And sunset's now 7:15, so where are the kids going to play? They can't play in our parks, so we lock the parks. The other piece of this is, a lot of this comes about when kids used to skip on the roads, etc. Traffic was slower, and the unattention of the drivers was much less, so we only had impaired driving. Really, we had to concern ourselves with a couple of other things. We have texting now. When people go into their own communities, their own surveys, they feel safe. They don't text. They text on their phones because they don't think they're going to get caught. Their attention to driving becomes a little less. So there's a lot of things that are going to contribute to this decision on yours. It's not a light one. So,
thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dillon.
Thank you. And so I like this motion. I have two kids, 10 and 6, who have a tendency to want to play on an iPad or a phone. And so my street in particular, there's a whole bunch of kids that play outside every day. And, having the street for them to play on, just like, I did when I was younger, playing hockey or basketball or tag or whatever it may be. I think that's just part of North American culture, I guess. But I'm sure it's other places as well. We do have a park nearby, but we can't always keep an eye on them. And so I think we want to encourage them to get active. So, but in terms of the direction, is there any way we can look into some type of signage, whether it's paid by the residents or by the city, that notifies? I know we do have signage around schools, but particularly in neighborhoods where there are a lot of kids, that we can have something in place there, some type of options for them. I've always thought, so I put my basketball net occasionally on the road where our car is usually parked, and I always thought that it'd be a good idea, if I want to stop the flow of cars, to have some type of sign you place in the middle of a lane, so if somebody's turning in there, they'd be forced to go around. If somebody's coming in from the other direction, they'll be forced to go around, and so obviously that slows the speed of the car down, but it gives the kids some time to, it gives them more notice that a car is coming. And so these are just things that I've seen, I've thought of, what ifs, as I see my kids play, and I know that when I was younger, we used to play as well. And so in terms of the direction, if we can see just get some creative ideas, including signage or anything else that we can kind of look at to see how we can keep the streets safe, and maybe even look at particular streets and kind of disqualify certain types of street. I know on Brock Drive, it's pretty busy, but the kids still play there as well. And so just some comments, but I do support the motion.
All right, thank you, Councilor Dill. Councilor Medeiros?
Yeah, through the chair, just lastly, I guess the report, again, you know, the now signage and everything, I just think it really becomes unruly on, you know, ultimately it's about promoting 2020 participation. So I guess if staff can go away with creative minds on, you know, maybe we don't have to touch anything, it's just about us supporting participation. You know, I'm, again, honestly, and I have, you know, children myself, I don't see too many kids. Every parent is afraid to have their kids out there based on the complaints that we get about speeding. And then my concern is all of a sudden that there's some interpretation that we put out there that council is endorsing sports activity on roads. And, you know, that's our message out there. And now we're going to create a whole new, you know, sports infrastructure on our roads and having to deal with us, notwithstanding liability, but it's almost like on two-ended. Our streets are not safe to, if it's already difficult for us to deal with all the speeding and in traffic, can you imagine now parents calling us saying that, you know, Jimmy can't play hockey in front of my street, it's not safe. Can you guys ensure that this is safe? Put barriers so they can play hockey. They can. So I don't know. I think the intent is great. I think staff should come back and look at focusing on the participation aspect and see what we need to get done, if we need to do anything. Because it could be simply we just don't touch anything and we support participation, endorse it as a communication, and maybe don't touch the technical aspect of it. Because then we're going to be incurring costs, liability, signage, and this and all this other stuff. So I don't know. Anyways, that's.
I guess I'm going to ask for clarification. The way this motion is written right now, it sounds like there's instruction in this motion, direct staff instructed to report back. And some people are saying we just want to report. So I just want clarification. Are you asking just for a report, or are you, but this is, I don't know if this is.
That looks at those three areas.
Which?
So looking at the bylaw and the participation, and, you know, it's just a report.
So through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps I could help. The first clause is a statement of commitment of support and intent. That's fine. Mm-hmm. I think the second paragraph, there may be some issues in terms of what the bylaw says today. Paragraph 3 is requesting a report back on ways that the bylaw could be amended. It's not committing to anything. Right. And paragraphs 4 and 5 speak to the 2020 participation. So there's 2 report requests, one in clause 3, one in clause 4. I think it's clause 2 that may be the issue. And that perhaps instead of referring it, if that clause were to be removed, staff would be reporting back on ways that the bylaw could or could not be amended, and staff will also report back on the 2020 participation challenge.
Okay. Councilor Williams, do you accept that or no?
To have that
removed,
the second part removed?
Yeah, clause 2 would be removed because it, as currently stated, as according to legal services, may not be legally or technically correct in light of our current bylaws.
Can it say based on results of the report, or, you know?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe clause 2 is making a statement that may or may not be upheld by our current bylaw environment.
So perhaps through the chair, if you were to remove the second one, remember that the third one is asking staff to look at potentially, the impacts, or not necessarily the impacts, but how we could allow for hockey nets and basketball nets and other sports to be played. In that analysis, I think you're going to get the answers or the staff position in respect of number 2 in any event. So The concern with the second one is that it's a little bit iffy as to whether in fact that is correct. And I'd hate to have council effectively resolve that playing of sports and so on within our streets is permitted. There are circumstances where it wouldn't be permitted. The second one is the concern. I think the third one would give us an opportunity to speak to it in the report.
I believe there's new people on board.
Sure, Councillor Dill.
So I was just thought I would remind everybody that I was reminded by Councillor Bowman that the city of Brampton was the downtown street hockey champions for 2017 and 2018. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Paleshi.
So we're talking about nets on roads is what we're talking about, and what we've been talking about for the last, I don't know how long. We're just talking about street hockey nets and basketball nets. I can't believe that we're discussing this for this amount of time. I'm
All right. So,
I'm embarrassed that we're.
So are you going to remove that, Councillor Williams, or no? Okay. So I'm going to make a suggestion that we vote on.
So if I still have the floor, I'd like to refer this back to staff and also to the Brampton Community Safety Advisory Committee. Thank you. Or deferral, so that there's no more debate. Deferral.
But you've talked. Can somebody defer after they've talked?
Through you, Mr. Chair, they cannot. They're supposed to move deferral up front, but I take it Councillor Paleshi moved referral back to staff for further consideration, including consultation with the Community Safety Advisory Committee. And that's the whole motion, including all 5 clauses. So now, Mr. Chair, we're in a referral debate. Members can speak to referral only, in favor or against.
Okay. Okay. No. We have a call. Yeah. Okay, let's take it step by step.
Okay, so.
You weren't on the board though. You weren't on the board to call the. Is that correct? That's up to the city clerk. Councilor Rowena yelled out, called the question. Yeah, you have to be on the board. Okay. Your Councilor Dillon was on the board, he just went off. Councilor Williams, we're speaking to the referral.
Okay, so if that portion, that second statement is preventing this from going to staff to get the report, we can remove that piece because it's going to answer the question in the bylaw review. Yes, I hadn't gotten to the chance to say that. Yeah. So then fine, we can remove that piece and have it answered in the report and address that at a later date.
We're talking about the referral now. So
Okay.
you missed your, so you gotta vote on the referral. If it gets defeated, then you have the opportunity.
Okay.
Okay, Councilor Santos.
The question on the referral.
Okay. So members who have not spoken to the referral, right? So Councilor Dillon has not spoken to the referral.
Where is this being referred to? The Community Safety Committee?
Through you, it's being referred to staff
Okay.
for consideration in consultation, I believe the councillor said, with the Community Safety Advisory Committee.
Okay. And I'll just say one thing though. It's this. The spirit of the motion I like, but it is too many. There's too many different parts moving. I guess for the future, if we can just kind of focus it to one thing, that's all.
Okay. Seeing no other speakers, we have a referral. Is the referral up? I see just move. Okay, verbal referral. All those in favor? Carries. All right, thank you. Now we're moving on to 8.3.4, discussion item at the request of Regional Councillor Dillon on the Federation of Canadian Municipalities event.
Oh, I'm on the board?
Yep.
Oh, okay, so I had brought this up a while back, and so I received an email as a member of the board of directors, and so The FCM has emailed the different municipalities across the country to inquire about the possibility of the municipalities applying to host some of or one of their events. And so I just brought it up for a discussion. I know, Al, you have a little bit of background you can provide as to what we're able to do, what we're not able to do, and I guess answer any of the questions that council does have. I think it might be an opportunity for us to either host one of the board of directors meetings. They're a little bit smaller in size and scale, or they have a sustainability summit that's coming up. I believe it's every couple of years. And I know I was talking to Councilor Willens as well. He's really, obviously because of the sustainability portion, he's really supportive of that. But it's basically just to gauge on what council thinks. If this is an opportunity that we can look at, we can talk about some of the benefits economically for us as well, to have 200 or 300 people come in and see what maybe some of the other benefits could be as well. And so just leaving it to council to decide, and I had already sent an email as well for you guys for your information.
All right, thank you. Councilor Medeiros?
Oh, I thought, Sao, did you want to respond, or did you want to
Sure.
speak?
Through the chair, I've had the opportunity to look at the 3 event RFPs that are currently, that have currently been issued by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Based on those 3 RFPs, there is a recommendation, or I have a recommendation that there is one of the events that we are in a very good situation to host, and that would be one of the directors' meetings. And I suggest that perhaps that's a good place for the City of Brampton to start as far as hosting.
So can we request, do we have time to request a report back, Councillor Dillon? That staff prepare or provide us with something in writing?
Right, and so I think we do, I'm looking at it right now. We do have time, and so these are, so for example, the annual conference and trade show, that's 2023 they're looking at, but I don't think we have the capacity to host that. So the Sustainable Communities Conference is in 2022. The Board of Directors meeting, we're looking in March 2022, September 2022, and then in 2023 as well. And so I think the closing date, the closing date is January 3rd, 2020. The RFP notice has been sent to all member municipalities as of September 17th. And so if we do decide to apply for one of these events, we'd have to do so by January 3rd, 2020.
So if that gives enough time to staff, I'd refer this to staff to come back and just ensure that we're getting return on investment. It's not something that there's no profile opportunity for the city. But thank you, Councillor Dillon, for bringing this forward, and I think it's a good endeavor for us to evaluate.
And if we can just look at the different options that we have and also inform council about the benefits or where it may not benefit us, and just so examine all the options, and then if we have it by December, make a decision whether to do it or not do it by December. I guess the last council meeting, then it'll give us enough time to apply by that January deadline date if that's what we decide to do.
Through the chair, may I ask that that date be brought forward some? If there is a decision to move forward with an interest in hosting one of these events, we would prepare a bid book as we do for conferences and large sporting events that come into the city, and respectfully, those do take some time to put together.
So I move it forward to...
Move it back to November?
Oh, yeah. I'm just saying the latest is December.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and no other speakers. So all those in favor? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. 8.3.5 is here for receipt. Moving on to 8.3.6. We have a discussion requested on meeting schedules, I believe by Councillor Pleshy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of our council meetings has been canceled, and we have this committee minutes. We have Monday's planning minutes, and we have entrenched in our committee minutes have something that's pressing to be ratified prior to a certain date. So, and Peter can talk a little bit more about it, but I think we should start looking at or direct staff to come back with a good date and time to hold a special council meeting.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the next regular council meeting is not scheduled until October 23rd. And as you've heard, some of the items today, some of the items discussed in closed, there are some sensitivity around timelines for getting a council ratification through the public minutes or the closed session minutes. So an option may be, if committee wishes to consider, is to pass a recommendation today that would be a proxy for calling a special meeting of council for October 16th, which is the next time that this committee is scheduled to meet. The meeting could be held 15 minutes after the adjournment of the regularly scheduled meeting. And the purpose of the meeting would only be for specific purposes, so no other new business could be added except for the possibility of considering some closed session business related to labor relations or employee negotiations if necessary, and then to receive, acknowledge, and approve as appropriate any outstanding council or committee minutes. And that includes the public session and closed session minutes from the council meeting of September 25th, the public session and closed session from the budget committee meeting of last Thursday, September 26th, the public and closed session minutes from today's committee of council meeting, and the public session minutes and closed session minutes, if required, for the planning and development committee meeting of October 7th, this coming Monday. So it presumably could be a very short meeting, just for ratification and consideration of these minutes, and no other business could be added.
Okay. And the suggested date is October 6th. Okay. Yep.
But you'll have that conversation with council members, because it's not all of us sitting here today, right?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So if a motion was introduced to that effect and it was carried, it would take I would consider it having the same force and effect as a petition by a majority of the members of council filed with the clerk to call a special meeting, because that's the only circumstance for which a special meeting can be called, either by the mayor, who's not present at the moment, or a majority of the members of council.
So I'm prepared to move that motion here today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Do we have that motion?
It's on the screen.
Perfect. So we have the motion in front of us as discussed. Do you want time to read it? Give everybody a minute. Everybody good? I don't think we need to vote because Councillor Bowman has said as acting mayor, he approves. Anyways, we have the motion in front of us. All those in favor? Okay, motion carries. Moving on to 8.3.7, discussion on federal election signs, I believe. Councillor Pelletier, you have the
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I meant to go back to this before, but I stand down this item for right now. Currently, bylaws are being reviewed, so I stand it down.
Yes, I believe we have a report coming. Yep. All right, thank you, Councillor Pelletier. Seeing no correspondence, Councillor's question period. Do any members of council have any questions? Seeing none, public question period. Seeing that no members have any questions from the public, pass it on to Councillor Vicente for Public Works and Engineering.
Members of council, we're about to begin the public works section. Items 9.2.1 and items 9.2.2 are part of the consent agenda. So our next item is item 9.2.3, a report on from the traffic operations technologist of Public Works and Engineering dated July 26, 2019 regarding traffic calming program citywide. Do any members have questions? Councillor Pelletier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was the councillor that deferred this and requested staff to provide more information that they provided I think is great, and I thank staff for doing that. I had a couple comments that I've directed to staff. I've also worked with staff to provide an additional recommendation that I've given to, I've shared with staff and the clerk, so if the clerk can put that up, and part of the recommendations of item 924. I won't introduce, it's self-explanatory. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, members of council, I'll give you a minute just to read the additional recommendation.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the first two recommendations are the staff report 9.2.4 and 3 and 4, the added amendments from Councillor Paleshi. I believe staff may have a comment on clause 4 in terms of the...
Yes, through the chair, just specifically to item number 4, the sentence indicates permanent installation of traffic calming measures. We'd prefer to see that as speed cushions. This roadway, we've already gone through that process of traffic calming measures on this roadway, so specific to those devices would be more appropriate.
Do any members have any questions with regards to the motion as it is written on the screen? Seeing none, motion is moved by Councillor Paleshi. All in favor? Carried. So now we need a motion to, we just voted on.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, what we voted on was 9.2.4, which was a supplementary report in regard to the deferred item 9.2.3.
Okay, so we still need to vote on item 9.2.3, which is the report for traffic calming program citywide. Do any members have any questions with respect to that report? Seeing none, Councillor Santos?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a quick question. The traffic calming measures on Vaughan Street, I would assume, is in conjunction with the ATMP plan with the big ask and putting in the cycle lanes, that's all.
Through the chair to Councillor Santos, yeah, the big ask would be included as part of that discussion. However, there is a consultation process that happens with the residents, and they would provide input on that proposal.
Thanks so much.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through you, Chair. We have traffic calming programs citywide, but are we able to get other areas of the city included in this list for the traffic calming plans?
Through the chair, I believe it's page 9.2.3-8 has the extensive list of all the locations that have been identified as proposed locations for traffic calming. If there's others that you have that you don't see on that list, we're more than, we welcome those, share them with us, and we will review them, and then if they meet the requirements, they will end up on that priority list.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, the priority list is based on the percentage, the speed percentile, the priority, because I see it's 1 Center Street and those in the areas that have been listed there. However, there's many areas on the east side of Ward 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 that aren't really captured in the top areas, so.
Through the chair, if you look at the list that's up on the screen right now, you can see there's a number of factors. They're all identified to the right of that list. Cut through traffic percentages, collisions, volumes, all those items are what are identified and set out the priority for the list. Again, if there's locations that you don't see on the list that you feel should be on that list, then forward them on to me and we'll review them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, so we have a motion to accept the report on traffic calming program citywide by Councillor Santos. All those in favor? Carried. Our next item on the agenda is other new business. There's none, no correspondence. We now are at item 9.5, Councillor question period. Do any members of council have questions with regards to any section, any part of this section? And now, seeing none, public question period. Do any members of the public have any question with regards to items in this section? Seeing none, I will now turn over the chair to Councillor Santos to chair the Community Services section.
Members of council, we are now at the community service section of the agenda. The first item of the agenda is item 10.2.1, a report regarding free transit fares for Brampton senior residents. Do any members have questions or comments on the staff report? Seeing none, may I have a motion to receive the staff report from Councillor Singh. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Next item of the agenda is item 10.2.2, a report regarding transit youth initiatives in support of a city youth strategy. Do any members have any questions or comments? Councillor Singh.
Yeah. So when I was reading the report, I saw the comparison between My Way and a similar pass in Brampton Transit. And so for My Way, they obviously have a little bit of a strategy for the Freedom Pass. But for us, it's like we can't afford this. Essentially, that's what the report says on the last bullet. So what can we – I just feel because we have the seniors pass when we just passed. You know, when I was a school trustee, I knew some of these youth and the difficulties they had, especially when they're in specialist programs, getting to schools halfway across the city and the financial burden. And I had to, you know, even pay out of my discretionary as a trustee to get them there because it's tough. So isn't there something more we could be doing, especially for these youth who don't have the opportunity to go to the school that's walking distance from them? And for better or worse reason, the school board doesn't provide any transit options.
So through the chair, not that we can't afford it, I wouldn't say that. What we're trying to say in this report is we were asked to report back to council on the youth strategy for specifically for transit. Yeah. We are, Councillor Singh, looking at working with our corporate youth strategy and how we're going to incorporate potential programs that's not just transit. It may involve rec, and again, until we go through that work to understand what the implications are. For example, what My Way is doing in Mississauga, where rec is leading that program by giving the pool time for free as well as the transit to get to and from. So as a corporate strategy, we're still continuing to look at all the options. This particular one was to report back on what we're doing today, and we are doing a lot of youth outreach. And if I may, through the chair, just briefly, we can describe what we're doing with the youth outreach, and we are targeting a lot of our students and options on potential different type of fares depending on what programs they're in through the different school boards as well. So if you want, we can expand a bit more in terms of what youth strategies we do, if that would help, and maybe I can ask Ivana just to speak to our youth strategy part.
Through the chair, we have an amazing community outreach coordinator, Navreet Chima, that I know many of you know, who is fiercely passionate about our community. And she attended over 140 events in the community last year, 46 of them targeted at youth. So we actually divide our youth outreach in 3 categories: elementary school kids, high school kids, and post-secondary school kids. And we start as young as elementary school is to really expose them to transit. So by the time they get to high school, and also making decisions with their parents how to get to high school, they're comfortable taking public transit. And then we also have relationships with post-secondary institutions such as Humber College and Sheridan College, and also private colleges where we go out and talk about the various ways to use public transit in Brampton. But to Alex's point, we will be working with the city strategic development team on the overall youth strategy and how we implement any transit programs through that.
Okay. Yeah, so my concern is more about the children that, can't, are forced to go to schools, like I said, halfway across the city. So they need to take transit or come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. But that's not just an issue for us at transit. That's also an issue connected to the school board and everything. So I'm going to hold off a little bit. I'll contact my contacts at the school board too and see what makes a little bit more sense to move forward, because this is helpful, because then I know exactly what we're doing and trying to find where the gaps are instead of sending this back or looking further. I don't even know where to look further, to be frank. So I'll hold off, but this is a discussion I'd like to continue at a later date.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Seeing there are no more questions on this report, may I have a motion to approve the staff report? Councillor Singh, all those in favor? That motion is carried. Next item on the agenda is item 10.2.3, a report regarding youth-friendly communities designation program. And I have to say, as chair, I'm enjoying the fact that we keep talking about youth every single council. Do any members of council have any questions about this report? No, I just have, as chair, I have just a couple of questions and thoughts on the report. Looking at the list of the various organizations who are being engaged in the process, there are some organizations that I would add to the list to highlight. So, for example, we have a youth robotics club here in the city of Brampton. We have various arts and progressive arts programs through Beau Arts that deal with youth arts programs, et cetera, et cetera. So it's more just adding more organizations to the list to engage in this process. That's it. Okay, so no further questions. May I have a motion to accept the report from Councillor Bowman? All those in favor? That motion is carried. The next item on the agenda was item 10.3.1, the minutes of Sports Hall of Fame, which was put into consent. Our final, or next to final, item on this section is councillor question period. Do any councillors have any further questions about this section regarding this community services or recommendations? None. Next item is 10.6, public question period. Do any members of the public have any questions regarding the recommendations in this section? Seeing none. The next item is item number 11, referred matters list. Do any members have any questions regarding the referred matters list? None. Public question period. Do any members of the public have any questions regarding any recommendations made at today's committee meeting? You have 5 minutes. Going once, twice, 3 times. No questions from the public. Thank you very much. We've already dealt with all the closed items on the agenda, which brings us to adjournment. Item number 14. Thank you, members, for your respectful consideration and recommendations, and thanks to our staff for your information and advice. May I have our next meeting is scheduled Wednesday, October 16th at 9:30. May I have a motion to adjourn today's meeting? Moved by Councillor Vicente. All those in favor? Thank you. Have an awesome afternoon.